case of Cherie Miller. Bruce and Cherie were both born and raised in Flint, Michigan, a city that was once a thriving hub of the Midwest auto industry, but had since fallen on hard times. Cherie Peck Keithley Miller was born on October 13, 1971, and by her own account, she had a deeply troubled childhood. Without a father figure in her life, Cherie grew up in a trailer with her mother, who struggled with addiction and had a string of unstable relationships with men. These men often abused Cherie, starting when she was just 3 or 4 years old. By the time she was 16, Cherie was on her own, and at 17 she got married, became pregnant, and had a child. However, the marriage didn't last, and she remarried and divorced again. Her second husband, Tribby, was convicted of second-degree child abuse after brutally assaulting his own child, causing multiple skull fractures. Tribby was also accused of abusing Cherie's 6-year-old daughter, but he was acquitted due to lack of evidence. Cherie seemed to have a pattern of attracting the wrong kind of men, always searching for someone who could provide her with financial security and emotional stability. By the time she was 26, Cherie found herself a single mother of 3, working multiple jobs to make ends meet, including a position at a nursing home and selling Mary Kay cosmetics. While she wasn't a conventional beauty, Cherie was charismatic and attractive. In 1997, she took a job as an accountant at B&A Auto Salvage, a company owned by 47-year-old Bruce Miller. At this point, Cherie saw Bruce as the kind of stable, successful partner who could finally provide her with the comfort and security she had always been missing. Bruce Leroy Miller was born on July 26, 1951. In his younger years, he worked at General Motors, a common career path for many Flint residents. After leaving GM, Bruce went on to own and operate an auto junkyard, where he would accept old cars and resell their parts. Bruce had 3 marriages and enjoyed activities such as racing and socializing. He was known for his generosity and openness. Initially, Bruce showed no romantic interest in Cherie Keithley, his new employee, but rather offered her support as a single mother facing difficult circumstances. However, Cherie eventually caught his attention, and despite their 20-year age difference, an office romance blossomed. Bruce was flattered by the attention of a younger woman, and they quickly moved from dating to living together. The couple got married on April 23, 1999, in one of Las Vegas's chapels, just 4 months into their relationship. After the wedding, Cherie and her children moved in with Bruce, providing her with the stability she had long sought. Bruce's brother, Chuck Miller, revealed on the TV show Snapped that Cherie often praised Bruce, saying he was the best thing that had ever happened to her, as he provided her with a normal life and the means to make her happy. Chuck's wife, Judy, added that Bruce was smitten with the young, attractive blonde, whom he considered the perfect wife. While friends voiced concerns about Cherie's excessive spending habits, which went beyond her means, Bruce chose to ignore it. Cherie would later admit that she had been trying to fill a constant void by instantly maxing out her credit cards and spending all the cash she could find. Despite her friends' misgivings, Bruce remained unconcerned about his wife's spending habits. Cherie, a hard worker, had a job as a Mary Kay cosmetic saleswoman, allowing her to sell products to customers at home or while traveling across the country to manage her accounts. In fact, Bruce even bought her a computer to support her work. The turning point came with this purchase. In 1999, Cherie Miller stumbled upon adult chat rooms while using her home computer to research a vacation destination. At the time, social networking didn't exist, and text messaging was not common. Instead, people connected with each other in online chat rooms, some of which were adult in nature and allowed users to flirt anonymously, share fantasies, and engage in virtual romances. According to friends, Bruce was aware of his wife's online flirting, but didn't see it as a problem. He loved his wife, was happily married, and planned to adopt her children. He preferred to trust her rather than letting suspicions overshadow their family life. Cherie soon became comfortable in the virtual world, and began regularly logging into chat rooms, sharing her deepest sexual fantasies with strangers under various aliases. Detective Kevin Shanlian, who investigated the murder case, testified that Cherie had at least 25 different aliases. In 2016, Cherie admitted that she was glued to the computer. She explained that Bruce worked at the store and had his own business, so he was often away. Cherie spent hours flirting online, driven by a need to control everything. She obsessively controlled people who trusted her, treating every man and every relationship like a new level in a video game, each one more challenging than the last. Among the men Cherie Miller met online was Jerry Cassidy, who used the pseudonym Rena Dudes. Born on October 6, 1960, in Kansas City, Missouri, Jerry was a married man who raised a son, enjoyed deer hunting with his brothers, and had a dream of becoming an FBI agent while working as a homicide detective. However, when he reported corruption involving falsified records to a coworker, he faced retaliation, was demoted, and eventually forced to resign after 9 years of service. Despite doing the right thing, the experience ended his career. Depression, drinking, and substance abuse followed, which led to the breakdown of his marriage. Later, Jerry got his life back on track, moved to Reno, Nevada, and became a security guard at Harrah's Casino. In his free time, he frequented chat rooms where he met Cherie Miller. Their online correspondence turned passionate, and in July 1999, they met in person in Reno, where Cherie claimed to be attending a Mary Kay convention with a friend. The online romance blossomed into a physical affair, and Jerry thought his life was finally taking a turn for the better. Cherie presented herself as a wealthy businesswoman living with a disabled husband who was seeking a discreet sexual encounter. Jerry believed her, as his friend Carol Slaughter would later recall. At the time, Jerry was at a low point in his life. His marriage had ended, and he was in a new neighborhood with no friends. He became deeply infatuated with Cherie, telling Carol Slaughter that Cherie was exceptional in the bedroom. Throughout the summer and fall, Cherie used her cosmetics business as a front for frequent trips to Reno, where she would secretly meet with Jerry. The two exchanged explicit emails and instant messages, including intimate videos, and even went so far as to rename their online accounts, with Cherie calling herself Jerry's Fool and Jerry calling himself Cherie's Fool. Despite his background as a cop, Jerry seemingly failed to notice any red flags, blinded as he was by Cherie's professions of love. Whether due to naivety, flaws, or emotional vulnerability, Jerry proved to be an easy target for Cherie's manipulation. She quickly wove a web of deceit, convincing him that he needed to kill her husband. The impact on Jerry was evident to those around him. His friends noted that after Cherie entered the picture, he became increasingly erratic, exhibiting symptoms akin to bipolar disorder. He would be overly excited and energetic before her visits, only to plummet into painful depression after she left. As early as September, Cherie claimed to be pregnant with Cassidy's child, sending Jerry fake evidence, including doctored photos, a forged positive pregnancy test, and even fake belly pictures. Shortly after, she feigned that her husband Bruce had discovered her infidelity, beating her and causing her to miscarry. Unbeknownst to Jerry, Cherie had actually undergone a tubal ligation in 1995, rendering her sterile. Jerry had no reason to doubt her lies, and so he believed every word. After losing the baby, Cherie announced that she was pregnant again, this time with twins. Jerry begged her to leave her abusive husband Bruce, take the children, and come live with him. Cherie feared for her life and Jerry's, claiming Bruce had mafia connections and wouldn't let them leave. Despite her fears, Cherie continued to secretly meet Jerry in Reno. During one of these meetings, Jerry was arrested for drunk and disorderly conduct at a casino, which temporarily halted their online communication. After his release, Jerry decided to protect Cherie from further danger by distancing himself from her and returning to Missouri to reconcile with his family. The online relationship continued, with Cherie sending Jerry photos of her ultrasound and growing belly. On November 5, 1999, Jerry received an ominous email, allegedly from Bruce, threatening to prevent the twins' birth. Alarmed, Jerry tried to contact Cherie but received a message from her hours later, saying she had to leave for a few days. The next day, Jerry received a message from Bruce, revealing that he had forced Cherie to have an abortion. The message included disturbing photos of a battered Cherie. Jerry had reached his breaking point. The tragic deaths of his twin children at the hands of Bruce Miller had left him devastated and consumed by anger. He held Bruce responsible not only for the loss of his 3 children, but also for the suffering of the woman he loved. The next day, November 8th, Jerry confided in Cherie, declaring his intention to kill her husband. Together, they began to orchestrate a plan to take his life. They carefully mapped out routes, identified ideal parking spots, and pinpointed the perfect location and time to dispose of the body. Jerry then embarked on the long journey from his home to Michigan. As Bruce prepared to leave work, he received a call from Cherie following their plan. She asked him to pick up a pizza on his way home, distracting him from the impending danger. Unaware of the threat lurking behind him, Bruce failed to notice Jerry approaching, shotgun in hand, before he pulled the trigger. After committing the crime, Jerry returned home while Cherie set the next part of their plan in motion. She contacted Bruce's brother, Chuck, pretending to be worried about her husband's prolonged absence, and requested that he drive to the junkyard to check on him. When Chuck arrived, he found his brother's lifeless body on the floor, lying in a pool of blood, with a close-range shotgun wound to the chest. Witnesses reported that Cherie reacted with screams and tears upon learning of Bruce's death. The crime scene was promptly discovered, but the perpetrator had left behind no trace or evidence. Investigators found that Bruce typically carried large sums of cash, leading them to initially suspect that his death might have been the result of a botched robbery, since his wallet was missing. Suspicion fell on John Hutchinson, a friend and employee who had recently borrowed $2,000 from Bruce. Police questioned Hutchinson, searched his home, and seized his weapons, but he denied any involvement. Although Hutchinson failed a polygraph test, the investigation proved inconclusive, and he was eventually released. A theory that the murder was committed to falsify vehicle identification numbers was explored, but none of the leads panned out, and the case was eventually closed. In the meantime, Cherie's behavior seemed suspicious to Judy Miller, the sister of Bruce, the victim. Just 2 days after her husband's death, Cherie was seen dancing happily in a bar in Otisville, Michigan. 2 weeks later, she had already started dating a local delivery boy named Jeff Foster, not Jerry Cassidy, her supposed lover. Jerry Cassidy had expected to be with Cherie after the murder, but she started to distance herself from him instead. A month after the murder, Cherie moved her new boyfriend into her house and cut ties with Jerry, leaving him heartbroken. It was likely at this point that Jerry realized he had murdered an innocent man due to Cherie's manipulation, and feelings of guilt overwhelmed him. He transformed from Cherie's lover to an investigator and discovered that all the accusations were fabricated by Cherie herself. On February 11, 2000, Jerry took his own life in his apartment in Odessa, Missouri, using a .22 caliber rifle. His body was discovered in a chair with an open Bible on his lap. The Bible was open to Matthew 5, which contains the passage, "Thou shalt not kill, and whosoever shall kill shall be liable to judgment." It seemed that Jerry had judged himself, confessed his guilt, and taken his own life as punishment. Cassidy's mother revealed in an interview a few days after the body was removed that while cleaning the apartment, family members found a briefcase containing 3 suicide notes and an envelope attached to the outside. Jerry's motive was revenge against the woman who had broken his heart. In his confession, the former detective explained that he had killed Bruce Miller because he believed at the time that Bruce had abused Cherie and was responsible for the deaths of his 3 children. However, the letter also revealed that Cherie Miller had lied to Jerry about Bruce's behavior. On February 22, 2000, police arrested Cherie Miller, as she arrived at the airport with her boyfriend, Jeff Foster, after a trip to Reno. She was charged with second-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Prosecutors believed that Cherie was a skilled manipulator who had convinced Jerry to kill her husband under false pretenses. Despite the evidence against her, Cherie maintained her innocence to her deceased husband's family. On December 12, 2000, the trial of Cherie Miller began in the state of Michigan, generating widespread national attention due to the unusual nature of the internet-related crime. The public's interest was exceptionally high. The prosecution presented thousands of messages exchanged between Cherie and Jerry, revealing the numerous lies she had told. Cherie claimed she had undergone a fallopian tube ligation years prior, and therefore could not be pregnant with Jerry's children, and that she had never been abused. However, the prosecution alleged that Cherie wanted her husband Bruce dead for financial gain, as a divorce would not have provided her with sufficient money. In contrast, the defense argued that Cherie received only a minimal sum after Bruce's death and would have enjoyed a more affluent lifestyle had she remained married. The defense also suggested that Jerry Cassidy was seeking revenge as a spurned lover and had fabricated evidence against Cherie. Cherie told the jury that her online sexual communications with Jerry were merely a fantasy, and that she had lied about her pregnancy to help him cope with depression and about the abuse to deter him from contacting her. Cherie vehemently denied writing the messages that described the crime, implying that Jerry had forged them using his expertise as a homicide detective. However, the police discovered evidence of the messages on Cherie's computer. The online correspondence played a crucial role in the trial. Miller was convicted on December 22nd, receiving a life sentence for murder and 54 to 81 years for conspiracy. In 2007, while incarcerated, she was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and other mental health issues. Miller began treatment and filed an appeal, even getting married for the fourth time. Michael DeNoia saw Miller's story on the news and was captivated by her charm. He wrote to her, and in 2008, he visited her in prison, proposing during the visit. Although some reports claim they got married in April 2008, there is no evidence to support this. In 2008, Miller's conviction was overturned on appeal, and she was released from prison in 2009. A federal judge ruled that Jerry's suicide letter should not have been considered evidence, as Cassidy was deceased and the defense could not cross-examine him. The judge ordered a new trial and released Miller on bail. In 2012, Cherie was returned to jail to resume serving her original sentence, following a court ruling that re-evaluated the admissibility of the suicide letter. Having spent 3 years outside, Cherie continued to proclaim her innocence. In 2016, Cherie Miller unexpectedly confessed to her role in her husband's death in a 4-page letter to a judge. Many saw this as a bid for sympathy or profit. Cherie wrote that being sent back to prison after 3 years of freedom triggered her admission. She was devastated to leave her daughter and granddaughter behind, and the full weight of her actions hit her. She described her husband as a great man who only loved and wanted to adopt her children, and she was filled with remorse for ordering his killing. Cherie gave a 2022 TV interview, confessing Bruce wasn't mob-connected and didn't abuse her. She faked bruises and ultrasound scans to control Jerry, fearing Bruce would discover her true identity. Cherie knew Jerry's depression and had evidence, but thought she could manipulate the jury. She rejected a 15-year plea bargain, leading to a life sentence. Now incarcerated, Cherie seeks peace, saying it's hard to face her actions. Laura Peacher, 28, was last seen on October 16, 2018, dining at a bar in Sebring. 3 days later, a restaurant employee in Tampa called 911 after finding something suspicious near a dumpster. Laura was a vibrant and social woman. She was born in Michigan in 1989, had an older sister and brother. Laura was born with a short left arm, featuring a thumb and 2 fingers. Throughout her life, She faced discrimination due to her physical difference, but she persevered and remained positive. Laura worked as a job coach at Goodwill, supporting individuals with physical and mental disabilities. Despite her own challenges, her disability was just a part of her unique character. Laura grew up in Michigan before moving to Sebring, Florida, at age 26. She relocated to assist her aging grandmother, demonstrating her caring nature by leaving her job to be there for family. On the morning of October 19, 2018, a 911 call was made by restaurant employees who discovered a woman's body near a dumpster behind their establishment. They reported a foul odor, initially suspecting it was from a dead animal. Upon closer inspection, they found what appeared to be a deceased woman. When detectives arrived, they found the victim face down, partially undressed, with a plastic bag over her head, part of the body covered by a wooden board. She was identified as Laura Peacher, wearing a dress that had been pulled down below her breasts. Her hands were tied behind her back with a purse strap. A search of the dumpster uncovered a clear plastic bag containing personal items, including mail and a wallet with an identification card. Investigators discovered that Laura was not from Tampa but lived in Sebring, Florida, roughly 2 hours away. She owned a silver Toyota Tundra pickup truck, which she likely used to travel to Tampa. However, her pickup truck was not found in the parking lot near the crime scene. It was later reported as stolen and added to a law enforcement database for recovery efforts. Investigators spoke with the restaurant manager about the situation. The restaurant owners had cleaned the parking lot just 2 days before, on Wednesday. Since Laura's body was found on Friday morning, it was likely placed there between Wednesday and Friday. The medical examiner conducted an autopsy and discovered clear marks on Laura's neck, suggesting she had been strangled with a thin, rope-like object. Additional signs on her body indicated that she had been on the ground for an extended period, with noticeable discoloration of her skin. The medical examiner determined that Laura had died on Wednesday, 2 days before her body was found. Meanwhile, 1,200 miles away in Michigan, police informed Laura's family about her death. Her parents were devastated and made a 20-hour journey from Michigan to Sebring. Meanwhile, her pickup truck was still missing. The investigators knew they needed to piece together the timeline of Laura's final hours to solve the case. They aimed to uncover why Laura had traveled from Sebring to Tampa, who she had met, and the whereabouts of her pickup truck. Detectives first examined Laura's cell phone records. They found that on Wednesday, between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m., she received calls but stopped answering her phone, indicating something had gone wrong. The records also revealed that she made 2 calls that morning to a man. Laura's friends identified him as her boyfriend, making him the first potential suspect. Detectives wanted to speak with him to determine when he last saw Laura and whether there were any issues in their relationship. Before they could locate Laura's boyfriend, police received a tip that Laura's pickup was seen outside a convenience store in Tampa. Detectives rushed to the store, located 3 miles from where Laura's body was found. Upon arrival, they discovered that the pickup truck was no longer there. However, both the exterior and interior of the store were equipped with surveillance cameras. The detectives hoped these would provide critical information. After reviewing the camera footage, investigators saw a pickup truck arrive and park at the store. Although they attempted to zoom in for better clarity, the video quality was poor, preventing them from identifying the driver. Once parked, a man got out of the passenger seat, indicating that there were at least 2 people in the vehicle. This man seemed aware of the cameras, as he kept his head down and wore a baseball cap. He entered the store, but again, the video quality made it impossible to see his face. The man tried to steal some beer, but store employees stopped him. After leaving the store, he returned to the pickup and sat in the passenger seat, while the driver remained in the vehicle and was not visible on the cameras. About an hour later, patrol officers found Laura's pickup truck parked on the road, showing signs of a minor accident. The same man seen in the surveillance footage was sitting in the passenger seat. Upon his arrest, he identified himself as Calvin Gary. He was on probation and wearing an ankle monitor. There was no one in the driver's seat of the pickup truck, only a pair of abandoned shoes, suggesting that the driver had run away. Laura's pickup was sent to forensics for a detailed search for any evidence while detectives began interviewing Calvin. He claimed he had obtained the truck from a man known as Hot. Calvin stated that Hot had recently arrived in the neighborhood and that they had plans to steal beer from a convenience store. When detectives asked Calvin if he knew how Hot acquired the pickup, he said he did not know. He maintained that he had no information about Laura or what had happened to her. Calvin described Hot as a relatively short African-American male. He also provided detectives with Hot's location, guiding them to a specific address. Upon arriving, the detectives found Hot hiding in a bush, trying to avoid being seen, but they spotted him. They called for him to come out. When he did, he was wearing a shirt and pants but no shoes. The detectives asked the man to identify himself, but he refused to provide his name and was uncooperative. They then requested that he walk over to their pickup truck, which was equipped with technology for quick fingerprint identification. When they scanned his fingerprint, it matched a record in their database, revealing that his real name was Gary Tyrone Danielle. He had a long criminal record and had been incarcerated 3 times. Additionally, Danielle was from Sebring, the same town where Laura lived. Because he was not wearing shoes, detectives became even more suspicious that he may have been driving Laura's pickup truck. However, at that time, the police did not have sufficient evidence to charge him with a crime, so they had to release him. The investigators then focused on Calvin Gary, who, along with Gary Danielle, had driven Laura's pickup truck. Since Calvin wore a monitoring device, law enforcement could track his whereabouts. They found that he had never gone to the dumpster where Laura's body was discovered, nor had he visited Sebring, where she lived. Because of this evidence, the police ruled him out as a suspect. After interviewing Laura's boyfriend, detectives also cleared him as a suspect thanks to his solid alibi. He told them that on the evening of Tuesday, October 16th, Laura had gone to a bar in Sebring. This detail was significant since Laura had been at the bar the night before her death, prompting detectives to visit the bar and talk to the staff. The manager revealed that Laura often stopped by for a meal since she lived nearby. The last time she had been there was on the night of Tuesday, October 16th, and she appeared to be friendly and happy, with no unusual behavior noted. Detectives discovered that the establishment had surveillance cameras that recorded everything. They reviewed the footage, which confirmed the bar manager's account. Laura was wearing the same dress as when her body was found. She was sitting at the bar, chatting with a waitress, had not ordered any alcohol, and nothing unusual was happening. She only spoke to the waitress before leaving around 11 p.m. Further investigation revealed that about 4 hours after Laura left the bar, a witness saw her with a man. Around 2:45 a.m., the witness spotted her at a gas station near a convenience store on the other side of town. At that time, Laura was in her pickup truck and appeared to be fine. There were no signs that she was in distress or needed assistance. The witness also stated that Laura drove away with a man. Investigators went to the gas station where Laura was last seen and reviewed the surveillance footage. At 2:54 a.m., they saw Gary Danielle enter the store to buy cigarettes and talk to another customer before leaving. Another camera recorded Laura's pickup truck backing out of the parking lot and onto the highway. This sighting aligned with an eyewitness report stating that they saw Danielle and Laura together at the gas station near Sebring early Wednesday morning. To find clues linking Gary Danielle to Laura's murder, investigators examined items found in a dumpster. They discovered a partially torn ATM receipt that provided details leading law enforcement to a specific ATM at a gas station in Lakeland. The receipt showed a transaction occurred at 3:30 p.m. on Wednesday, 12 hours after Laura was last seen in Sebring. Detectives then visited the gas station where the ATM was located, hoping the surveillance footage would help them solve the case. After reviewing the footage, investigators located Laura's pickup truck, but they couldn't identify who was inside. Luckily, there were several cameras, and after the truck was parked, they captured Gary Danielle getting out and walking to the store. He withdrew cash from the ATM, purchased a soda, and then left the store. Laura did not get out of the truck and was never seen, leading detectives to conclude that she was likely dead by the time Danielle returned to the truck and drove toward the location where her body was eventually discovered. Danielle was taken to the police station for questioning. At that time, the police only had evidence that he had used Laura's pickup truck, so they began asking him about it. Danielle claimed that he found an unlocked truck with the keys inside and decided to take it. He stated that was the only action he took, and he had no knowledge of who owned the pickup. He mentioned that the interior of the truck appeared normal and he didn't observe anything unusual. The detectives showed Danielle a picture of Laura and asked if he recognized her. He said he did not know her. When they inquired if he had ever met Laura in Sebring, he again replied no. They informed him that they had surveillance camera footage from a gas station in Sebring that showed him with Laura. Danielle understood that the police suspected him of Laura's murder and chose not to answer any more questions. At that point, the detectives lacked physical evidence to prove to a jury that Danielle had killed Laura. There is a specific time limit for a person to stand trial, which begins when the suspect is arrested. Since the detectives were still awaiting forensic results, they decided to release Danielle. Although there was a significant risk that he might flee, forensic analysis provided substantial insights into the case. Experts discovered drops of Laura's blood in the back seat of her pickup truck. This indicates that her body was likely in the back seat at some point after her death, or that the crime occurred inside the truck. Investigators received a forensic report on items found near Laura's body, which showed DNA on the strap used to bind her hands. This DNA matched that of Danielle. Additionally, his DNA was found under Laura's fingernails. The DNA evidence and surveillance footage were sufficient to file charges, leading to Gary Danielle's arrest. At the time of his arrest, Danielle did not make any statements and chose to exercise his right to remain silent. He faced charges of first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and grand theft of a motor vehicle. Using the evidence collected, investigators attempted to create a timeline of Laura's final hours. They confirmed that she had been at a bar in Sebring alone and left the bar around 11 p.m. Following that, she went to the town center, where she met friends. On that same night, she encountered Gary Danielle for the first time, with no prior relationship between them. Investigators suspect that Laura may have agreed to give Gary Danielle a ride, possibly in exchange for money. Danielle's refusal to answer questions has left investigators uncertain about how he and Laura first met. However, it is known that Laura and Danielle were seen together at a gas station, where an eyewitness confirmed that Laura appeared alive and unharmed in her pickup truck. After leaving the gas station, something occurred that led to Laura being found strangled in her truck. The exact location of the truck at the time of her death is still unknown. 12 hours after the last sighting of Laura's truck in Sebring, surveillance cameras captured it at a gas station 25 miles outside of Tampa. At that time, Danielle was withdrawing cash from an ATM. He then drove to Tampa, where he concealed Laura's body next to a dumpster in a restaurant parking lot. Her body was discovered 2 days later. The trial for Laura's murder did not begin until nearly 3 years after her death, a delay largely due to global events. Laura's father, Art Peacher, spent a long time waiting to confront the man responsible for his daughter's death in court. Rather than condemning Danielle, he chose to remember Laura by sharing a story about her kindness. Art recalled an incident where a young boy pointed out Laura's short arm, and another boy mentioned her asthma. Laura responded, "Don't you know there's something wrong with everyone?" Her father presented several items in court that belonged to his daughter, including her journal. The cover of the journal had the phrase, "Live the life you've imagined." Inside, she had written about her dislike for cooking since she lived alone and had no one to help with the dishes. She also expressed her hatred for littering and shared her thoughts about her 4 tattoos. The most significant tattoo for her was a blackbird, which was a tribute to her sister-in-law who had passed away, inspired by a song. On August 24, 2021, Gary Danielle, age 50, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder as part of a deal with state prosecutors. In return for his plea, he accepted a 30-year prison sentence. He also confessed to charges of tampering with evidence and stealing a motor vehicle. During the short court hearing, Danielle, who is bald, has a short gray beard, and was dressed in orange jail clothing and handcuffed, remained silent in the jury box and did not address Laura Peacher's family. While the guilty plea concluded the legal proceedings, it left many questions unanswered, such as the reasons behind Laura's murder and how she came to be in contact with Danielle. The case of Yvonne Baldelli. Yvonne Baldelli was born on June 30th, 1969, in a small town in Southern California. She was the youngest of 3 children born to Marjorie and James Fold, with 2 older siblings, Michael and Michelle. Yvonne was especially close to her sister Michelle from a young age. Tragedy struck when Yvonne was 13, with the loss of her mother after a long illness. Her father James remarried a year later to Lillian, who turned out to be a kind and caring stepmother. Yvonne and her siblings developed a wonderful relationship with Lillian, who treated them as her own. Yvonne pursued a good education and experimented with various career paths, but her true passion lay in fashion design. She dreamed of turning her hobby into a successful business. However, her personal life was marked by misfortune. She had 2 failed marriages, the last one ending in divorce from Kevin Baldelli in 2007. Adding to her woes, Yvonne underwent surgery in her youth, which was followed by complications that left her unable to have children. After her second divorce, Yvonne lived a solitary life in her small apartment, where her only constant companion was her beloved dog, whom she lovingly referred to as her child. Despite her challenges, Yvonne remained close to her family, calling her father and sister daily and making it a point to visit them at least once a month. In 2009, as Yvonne was approaching her 40th birthday, she met Brian Brimmager, a married Marine with a young son. Despite being committed, Brian was open to an extramarital affair and confided in Yvonne about his unhappy marriage, stating that his only reason for not filing for divorce was the welfare of his child. Yvonne was taken by Brian's fit appearance and believed him. Having had a loveless marriage, she knew it was tough to leave, especially with kids. She didn't pressure him, thinking his child was the main issue. Little did she know, Brian was a charming liar, using his looks to juggle multiple relationships and fake promises. It became clear that Brimmager, who was married, was having an affair with not 1, but 2 women. One of them was Yvonne, and the other was Christine Verhoeven, a beautiful blonde with many influential contacts. Christine worked as an analyst at the White House. When Yvonne found out that her lover, Brian, was cheating on his wife with another woman, she decided to take action. Gathering her courage, she called Brian's wife to inform her that her husband was having an affair, not only with her, but also with another woman. This shocking news sparked a major scandal, forcing Brian to make a difficult decision. In the end, he chose Yvonne, although it's possible that she influenced his decision. A few months later, Brian officially divorced his wife and moved in with Yvonne. At the time, he was still serving in the Marines, but he had been thinking about ending his military career for a while. They seemed genuinely happy, but Yvonne's family remained skeptical of her new partner, questioning the sincerity of his feelings for her. In the summer of 2011, Brian started talking about making drastic changes to his life, including leaving the Marines, moving away from the city, and settling down on a tropical island. Yvonne shared his vision, supported him in everything, and was ready to follow him wherever he chose to go. She believed she had found the love of her life and adored him. By September, Yvonne decided to move to Panama's Carino Island, a tropical haven. Her dream was to open a boutique, creating custom outfits for tourists. In early September, Yvonne, Brian, and her dog flew to Panama, then took a ferry to Carino Island, renting an oceanfront house. The island's hot and humid climate attracted tourists, especially divers and surfers, year-round. Brian, a skilled guitar player since his teenage years, brought his instrument to the island with the intention of launching a music career, performing at various entertainment venues. Soon after settling in, he established connections with several local bar owners, and one of them offered him a gig. He would play in the evenings, entertaining the crowd, and as a token of appreciation, the audience would often buy him drinks, leading to a habit of heavy daily drinking. Yvonne's business, on the other hand, struggled to take off, with sluggish sales and meager profits. However, she persevered and found work at one of the bars. She also adopted a second dog, which she found on the island and decided to keep. She maintained daily contact with her sister Michelle Valenzuela, sharing every detail, but her messages became increasingly brief and somber, causing concern among her family. Initially, the island seemed like a paradise to they. Yvonne had hoped that Brian would propose and they would have a romantic beach wedding. However, as time passed, Brian showed no signs of rushing into marriage. Their relationship quickly began to deteriorate. In early December, Michelle became concerned when she stopped receiving messages from her sister Yvonne. Then, on December 14, 2011, Michelle received an unexpected call from Yvonne's boyfriend Brian. He asked when he could come by to pick up his SUV, which he had left in Michelle's garage before he and Yvonne had traveled to Panama. This call surprised Michelle because it meant Brian had returned to the US. But where was Yvonne? Why hadn't she come back or even reached out? Brian told Michelle that he had explained everything in an email he had sent a few days earlier. He also claimed that Yvonne had sent Michelle a message explaining the situation. Michelle checked her messages but found nothing. So, she turned to her email and discovered two unread messages, one from her sister Yvonne and one from Brian. Brian claimed in his message that Yvonne had left him for a new lover and moved to Costa Rica. However, a message supposedly from Yvonne stated that she had left him after discovering his infidelity and that another woman, Christine Verhoeven, had given birth to his child. This message also claimed that Yvonne had met someone new and gone to Costa Rica with him. It seemed believable at first, especially since Yvonne was unable to have children, and news of her partner's infidelity could have been devastating. However, Yvonne was not one to act impulsively, and it was unusual that she hadn't contacted her sister to discuss her situation. The tone of the message from Yvonne also raised suspicions as it didn't sound like her previous communications. Michelle suggested filing a missing persons report for Yvonne, but Brian was hesitant, claiming she was fine and capable of taking care of herself. He insisted she would come home on her own, but his nervousness and quick departure after picking up his vehicle raised suspicions. Shortly after, a message from Yvonne's phone arrived, stating she would return home in January for their father's birthday. This brought Michelle some relief, and she decided to wait, hoping Yvonne would come back as planned. By mid-January, Yvonne remained missing and hadn't reached out. Meanwhile, Michelle was stunned to learn that Brian had unexpectedly married Christine Verhoeven shortly before the new year began. What made this even more surprising was that he had only parted ways with his previous girlfriend a few weeks earlier. Michelle's concern for her sister's safety prompted her to report Yvonne missing to the police, as she suspected Yvonne hadn't actually gone to Costa Rica. An official inquiry to Panama confirmed her fears, verifying that Yvonne Baldelli had not left the country. Michelle's cousin, a programmer, helped trace the IP address of the emails supposedly sent by Yvonne from Costa Rica in December. The investigation revealed that the emails were actually sent from Dana Point, California, where Brian was located. The same IP address was used for an email sent by Brian himself. As the situation grew increasingly alarming, Michelle quickly informed the police of her discovery. Valenzuela then reached out to the FBI and the State Department, sharing her suspicions that Brian had harmed her sister in Panama and continued to send messages from her phone and email, impersonating her for about a month. Although there wasn't enough concrete evidence to arrest Brian at the time, law enforcement interviewed him and continued gathering proof of his guilt. It was discovered that Brian had asked Christine to marry him while he was still in Panama with Yvonne, promising they would soon return and raise their daughter together. However, Christine was not aware that her child's father had gone to the island with another woman, as he had told her he was there on a business trip. 2 months after Yvonne's disappearance, her sister and niece conducted their own investigation and flew to Panama, where they sought the help of Don Winter, a former U.S. intelligence officer turned investigator, who specialized in finding missing U.S. citizens. They shared the story of Yvonne's disappearance and the version of events Brian had given. After listening to them, Winter immediately expressed his concern that the chances of Yvonne being alive were low. With his extensive experience in such investigations and using his connections, Winter decided to pressure the Panamanian government and publicize the case, turning Yvonne's disappearance into international news. A press conference was also organized, which included Yvonne's family members. After arriving in Panama, Yvonne's father, stepmother, brother, and several other relatives and close friends joined the search for Brian Baldelli and assisted in the investigation. Together, they thoroughly searched the tropical island of Carino, but found no trace of him. The dense undergrowth and swampy marshes, which were home to a wide variety of wildlife, hindered their search efforts. The family also questioned the island's residents about their knowledge of Brian and Yvonne and what they could reveal about the couple's behavior. It became clear that Brian and Yvonne had been drinking excessively and frequently got into loud public arguments, disregarding those around them. Almost daily, they were seen in bars, drinking and arguing. Moreover, people began to notice bruises and scratches on Yvonne's face and body, and she rarely removed her sunglasses, seemingly to conceal the bruises under her eyes. The landlord of the house they rented confirmed that neighbors regularly complained about the noise, screams, and cursing coming from their residents. Meanwhile, FBI agents brought in a specialized team of divers to search the waters surrounding the island for potential evidence or remains of the missing woman. Unfortunately, these searches also yielded no results. From the start, Brian was the main suspect in the case, but there was no solid evidence to charge him with. He repeatedly denied any involvement, sticking to the same story that his ex-partner Yvonne had run off with another man. It wasn't until September 21, 2012, that Brian was finally questioned by the police and a search of his home was conducted. At that time, his wife Christine was at work and Brian was unemployed, staying at home to take care of their child and enjoying his favorite hobby, playing golf. Brian claimed Yvonne left him after discovering his child with another woman, but became anxious when police found Yvonne's laptop on his table. The laptop had messages sent after she supposedly left, including a photo of Yvonne with a bruise and a conversation between Brian and his mistress about their secret affair. The search history showed queries about cleaning bloodstains and removing blood from a mattress. These pieces of evidence were significant but circumstantial, as neither Aon's body nor a mattress with bloodstains was found. The fact that Brian had been sending messages pretending to be Aon didn't definitively prove his guilt. However, a discovery by Don Winter shed more light on the case. Before leaving Panama, Brimminger had sold a machete he owned to a buyer online. During their conversation, he jokingly said he had used the weapon once to finish off a stripper. Although the machete was seized for examination, it didn't initially yield any conclusive evidence. The long-awaited arrest was still pending. Meanwhile, the police had overlooked a crucial detail: Yvonne's bank card, which Brian used after her disappearance to make it seem like she was still alive. Before returning to the U.S., Brian went to Costa Rica and used the missing woman's card a few times, creating the illusion that she had fled there. He paid for his tickets in cash and withdrew money from different locations in San Jose, eventually draining the card before discarding it. However, Brian didn't realize that he was caught on surveillance cameras at the ATMs. In July 2013, a year and a half after the woman vanished, her relatives, armed with evidence collected by the police, FBI agents, and Don Winter, finally succeeded in getting Brian arrested. At first, he was held on charges of lying and obstructing the investigation, as there wasn't enough evidence to charge him with anything more serious at that time. By then, Christine had given birth to a second son just a week before his arrest, making Brian a father for the second time. The authorities tried to have an open conversation with the suspect, offering him the opportunity to admit to the crime and reveal the location of Yvonne's body. However, Brian consistently denied any involvement. His lawyer also claimed that since there was no body or direct evidence linking Brian to Yvonne's disappearance, there was no proof of his guilt. In the swamp on the island of Quinero, a worker stumbled upon a gruesome discovery just 2 months after Brian's arrest. While taking a shortcut through the underbrush, the worker spotted an army backpack partially submerged in the water. Curious about what might be inside, the worker opened the bag, only to be met with horror at the sight of a human skull. The worker immediately notified the police, who responded and took the backpack into custody for further examination. Inside, they found fragments of a human body, as well as the remains of 2 small dogs. The remains had been deliberately dismembered, placed in the bag, and discarded in a remote area, likely intended to never be found. DNA testing later confirmed that the human remains belonged to Yvonne. However, many of her limbs were missing. Further examination by pathologists revealed that Yvonne had suffered a brutal beating before her death, including a broken nose, cheekbone, and several missing teeth. When the unique chop marks on the victim's bones were matched to the machete's blade, it confirmed that the body had been dismembered with this weapon, as each blade has a distinct signature, similar to human fingerprints. With this evidence, Brian was formally charged with murder, dismemberment, and concealing a crime. In 2014, Michelle Valenzuela got a cancer diagnosis, and after 6 months of intense treatment, realized it was futile. She dedicated her last months to seeking justice for her sister, testifying against Brian and submitting evidence to the court despite her weakening health. Brian assaulted Yvonne in a drunken rage after she discovered his affair, stabbing her to death. He then dismembered her body, killing her dogs, and hid the parts in a backpack in a swamp. Brian fabricated a story about Yvonne leaving him, gaining sympathy from locals, and even found a new girlfriend. However, during the trial, his girlfriend testified against him, and he was forced to admit his guilt, claiming self-defense despite evidence showing he was fully aware of his actions. In the spring of 2016, Brian was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 26 years in prison, with eligibility for parole in 2035. At sentencing, credit was given for his prior service in the Marines, which spared him from a life sentence. Meanwhile, Brian's wife, Christine Verhoeven, maintained her husband's innocence and pledged to stand by him no matter what. Anthony Todt was born on September 29, 1975, in Bensalem, Pennsylvania. His childhood was far from normal, marred by dysfunction and turmoil. His father, Robert Todt, was a high school teacher who had a particular attraction to young girls. Meanwhile, his mother, Loretta, is a housewife who is unaware of her husband's extramarital affairs with 16 and 17-year-old girls in his class. Robert's situation was even more complicated. He was engaged to a nurse while simultaneously involved with a student, all while still being married to Loretta. Eventually, Robert decided to get Loretta out of the way permanently so he could marry his fiancée. At the time, Anthony was just 4 years old. One night, he woke up to the sound of his mother screaming from her bedroom, followed by a gunshot. When he ran to her room, he found her on the floor, still alive despite being shot in the eye at close range. As the investigation unfolded, Robert's strange and detached reaction to the attack raised suspicions. Rather than showing concern, he seemed annoyed and disappointed that Loretta had survived. Authorities soon discovered that Robert had hired one of his mentally unstable students, offering him $900 to kill Loretta and make it look like a home invasion. He had given the student a house key, a gun, and specific instructions on where to find Loretta in her bedroom. This traumatic incident severely damaged Anthony's mental health, causing him to struggle to overcome what he had experienced. After divorcing Robert, Loretta remarried and did her best to help Anthony recover, but the damage was lasting. Discovering that his biological father had attempted to murder his mother permanently affected his emotional well-being. Despite his mental health challenges, Anthony was a highly regarded and hardworking student. He earned the respect of his classmates, being elected class president in both his junior and senior years. During high school, He met Megan, and their bond grew stronger over time. They pursued similar college degrees and got married just months after graduating. Following their wedding, Anthony and Megan moved from Pennsylvania to Connecticut and started a physical therapy business together. They worked hard to grow the practice until Megan became pregnant with their first child, Alexander. She then decided to leave her career to focus on motherhood. Despite the heartbreaking miscarriages, the family eventually had 3 children, Alexander, Tyler, and Zoe. To outsiders, their family appeared to be the epitome of the perfect American family. Anthony was a devoted husband and father, deeply involved in his children's lives and committed to providing for his family. Megan, now a stay-at-home mom, was equally devoted to raising their children. Their reputation as a loving and successful family grew, especially as Anthony's physical therapy business thrived. With their growing success, they purchased a condo in Celebration, Florida, a picturesque community near Walt Disney World. This is an ideal environment that brings happiness and safety to their family. They later moved to a larger house nearby and enjoyed a life filled with family activities, including trips to Disney World, beach outings, sports, and piano recitals. Anthony's business, based in Connecticut, required him to frequently travel back and forth for work, while Megan remained in Florida with the kids. For many years, the family seemed to lead a charmed life. However, their seemingly perfect life began to fall apart in 2011 due to unforeseen challenges. Megan, who had been bitten by a tick as a teenager, contracted Lyme disease, a bacterial infection. The disease may remain asymptomatic for years, but eventually it recurs, causing serious and unexpected health complications. In 2011, after returning from a trip to Disney World, Megan mentioned to her husband that she had been bitten by a bug. Initially, they assumed it was a minor issue that would resolve itself within a few days, as such infections often do. However, Megan's condition rapidly worsened, leading to diagnoses of tonsillitis, hepatitis, and other health problems. These illnesses not only affected her physical health but also took a toll on her mental well-being, resulting in a dramatic change in her personality. Eventually, Megan was diagnosed with depression, which deepened after yet another miscarriage. Her family situation also contributed to her struggles. Her husband, Anthony, managed their business in Connecticut during the week and only returned home to Celebration on weekends, leaving she feeling lonely and isolated. Unlike in Connecticut, where they had a supportive community, she found little to no support in Celebration. Her only source of comfort was the belief that her husband's physical therapy business was thriving. However, heartbreakingly, the reality was far from that. The business had been struggling financially for some time due to Anthony's mismanagement. Rather than focusing on its success, he used company funds to purchase condos across the country, intending to rent them out to vacationers. However, most of the properties operated at a loss and failed to generate profit. The income from the physiotherapy business was insufficient to support 2 households in different states, cover Megan's medical expenses, and pay for Anthony's frequent airfare. As financial pressures mounted, Anthony resorted to taking out small loans to make ends meet, but he was unable to repay them on time. To cover one loan, he would take out another, plunging deeper into a vicious cycle of debt. Things quickly spiraled out of control. Anthony was saddled with more than $100,000 in personal debt, along with mounting corporate debt and mortgages on his home in both Connecticut and Florida. Up until this point, he had kept their financial troubles hidden from Megan. Although he considered confessing, he ultimately decided against it. In a desperate attempt to fix the situation, he made a grave mistake. He began committing fraud to pay off their debts. He started submitting fraudulent invoices to health insurance companies and Medicaid for physiotherapy sessions that never took place. The money he received was used to pay off nearly 20 smaller loans, totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars. Over time, however, insurance companies grew suspicious. In 2019, the FBI launched an investigation. When agents interviewed Anthony's patients, they discovered that insurance companies had billed many of them for services they didn't receive. Some patients reported being charged for 5 weekly sessions when they had only attended 1 or 2. Others claimed they had moved out of state months earlier and had not seen Anthony at all. Further investigation revealed discrepancies in the records of the two clinics Anthony operated. The FBI uncovered invoices for therapy sessions on days the clinics were closed. On one occasion, Anthony billed for therapy sessions involving 16 patients, despite the clinic being shut that day. These findings prompted authorities to bring him in for questioning. Initially, he denied any wrongdoing, but patient testimonies made his claims indefensible. Eventually, he confessed to the fraud, insisting that his wife Megan was unaware of his crimes. He also agreed to plead guilty, provided Megan was not implicated in any charges. By September 2019, Anthony had lost his physiotherapy license, and both of his clinics abruptly closed, leaving employees without notice. Despite his confession, he was not immediately arrested. In November 2019, Anthony informed investigators that he planned to visit his family in Florida and would return to Connecticut by early December. However, after traveling to Celebration, Florida, he failed to come back as promised. By Christmas, his sister grew alarmed, having not heard from the family in weeks, a stark contrast to their usual pattern of communication. Worried, she contacted the police in Celebration and expressed her concerns. She informed them about Anthony's ongoing fraud investigation and shared that, during their last conversation, he mentioned that Megan and the children had been sick and bedridden for several days. When she received no further updates, her concerns deepened, fearing the situation was much worse than Anthony had indicated. On December 29, 2019, police officers visited Anthony's house to conduct a welfare check. Despite knocking on the door, there was no response, and the house appeared unoccupied. The Celebration Sheriff's Department noted in their report that the family had likely returned to Connecticut. However, it would take another 2 weeks to uncover that the entire Anthony family had been inside the home the entire time. On January 13, 2020, investigators from the Department of Health and Human Services, along with officers from the Osceola Sheriff's Department, returned to the residence. Over the course of 3 consecutive days, they knocked on the door but again received no answer. An eviction notice posted outside the home further led authorities to assume the family had relocated to Connecticut. Meanwhile, Anthony's sisters reported to local authorities that the family had been receiving unsettling messages sent from both Anthony's and Megan's phone numbers. Meanwhile, an FBI agent investigating Anthony's fraud case tracked him to Celebration, as he had failed to report back after traveling with his family to Florida for Thanksgiving. While monitoring the house, the agent observed Anthony briefly step outside, sit on the patio, and then return indoors. Immediately, the agent contacted the local sheriff's department, and officers arrived to arrest Anthony. In addition to the arrest, officers conducted a welfare check on Megan and the children after concerns were raised by their families. Upon being questioned about his wife and children, Anthony stated that his wife was sleeping and the children were at a sleepover. However, the officers noticed a peculiar odor emanating from the house. As they entered the master bedroom, the smell grew stronger and was unmistakably that of decomposing bodies. Inside the room, the remains of 42-year-old Megan and her 2 sons, Alexander and Tyler, were discovered. The family dog was also found dead in the same room. 4-year-old Zoe was initially not visible. The condition of the bodies indicated that they had been there for several weeks. Even more horrifying was the revelation that Anthony had been sleeping beside his deceased wife, Megan, all that time. When forensic experts began to remove the bodies, they discovered Zoe's badly decomposed remains in the room. Her body was so deteriorated that it had fused with her mother's remains. Anthony was immediately taken into custody and questioned about the events that had transpired in the home. Autopsy reports later revealed that Alexander and Tyler had been attacked in the abdomen. It was determined that the murders took place around Christmas in late December 2019. Initially, Anthony denied having any knowledge of the deaths of his wife and children. However, he later claimed that Megan had entered into a pact to end her life with him due to their shared fear of an impending apocalypse. According to him, she had supported him as he entered each of the children's bedrooms to kill them, suffocating Zoe and attacking Alexander and Tyler. He claimed that Megan then inflicted injuries on her own abdomen. Anthony was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder, and prosecutors announced their intent to seek the death penalty due to the severity of the crime. Although authorities had Anthony in custody in his initial confession, his story changed before the trial began. In a 26-page letter to his father, Anthony presented a new version of events. He claimed he was innocent and accused Megan of being the one responsible for their children's deaths. He alleged that she had administered Benadryl to the children, separated them, and attacked them one by one. In the letter, Anthony claimed that on the night of the murders, he had taken the family van to a nearby condo to perform repairs and retrieve a necklace for his daughter. He wrote that he played basketball with the boys in the driveway before leaving, while Megan baked a pie for the children. Anthony said that he didn't return home that night and instead slept in the van because the essential oils Megan used for her symptoms irritated his sinuses. The next morning, when the van wouldn't start, he claimed he had no choice but to walk back to the house. When he returned to the house the following morning, he discovered a half-eaten blueberry pie on the kitchen counter, emitting a strange odor. In a letter written by Anthony, he stated that Megan had confessed to having a vision of the end of the world and claimed that she had killed their children. Megan then attacked herself despite his desperate pleas for her to stop. In the letter, he described himself as a powerless witness to these events. He also added that he tried to contact law enforcement but was unable to do so as there was no working phone in the house. He further noted that he had moved all the bodies to the master bedroom and covered them with blankets to give them comfort. While awaiting trial in jail, Anthony shared multiple versions of the events with his sister. In one phone call, he told her that he had no memory of the murders. Nonetheless, when it came time to enter a plea, he pleaded not guilty to the charges of 4 counts of murder. During the trial, the prosecution argued that Anthony did not kill his family due to apocalyptic beliefs or to free their souls. Instead, they alleged that he murdered his family because his fraudulent financial schemes were about to be exposed. Members of Anthony's family also testified about his struggles with mental health. His sister shared that the family had once had a strong community connection in Connecticut. However, their move to Celebration, Florida, drastically changed everything. Within just 2 years, Anthony had gained a significant amount of weight, been diagnosed with diabetes, and begun keeping his work and financial activities secret from his family. When it was Anthony's turn to testify, he depicted himself as a grieving husband, devastated by the loss of his wife and 3 children. While discussing Megan's medical history, he appeared emotional at times, occasionally shedding tears, but also displayed irritation when interrupted while answering questions. He informed the court that Megan had been diagnosed with Lyme disease during her teenage years and had also been diagnosed with a heart condition before their relationship began. Additionally, he stated that she later developed drug-induced hepatitis. Throughout his testimony, he steadfastly maintained his innocence, claiming that his wife, Megan, was responsible for their children's deaths. Anthony testified that Megan became deeply influenced by a religious group after traditional medications failed to alleviate her symptoms. According to him, she had discovered the group online and embraced its teachings, believing the afterlife to be a release from her physical ailments and illnesses. He explained that Megan often attended virtual meetings with the group via Skype, sometimes with him present. As part of their practices, Megan was given specific prayers aimed at addressing her personal struggles. She also grew to believe in a concept called family lineage karma burning. She understood this to mean that resolving karmic burdens in one life would enable her family to achieve salvation and reincarnation in better conditions. He further claimed that Megan's involvement with the group was rooted in her desire to improve her health and her relationships with people who had mistreated or hurt her in the past. When recounting the incident of the murders, Anthony provided a narrative consistent with both the letter he had written to his father and a story he had previously told his sister. According to him, he was not at home when the murders occurred and had no memory of providing any recorded confession to the authorities. He claimed that when he returned home the next morning, Megan brought him into a room and confessed to killing their children. He stated that the shock caused him to fall down the stairs, hit his head, and fracture his neck. He said he could not remember anything else until he regained consciousness in jail. When questioned about the recorded confession, Anthony claimed to have no knowledge of it and said he first became aware of it during the court proceedings. However, in the confession, he admitted to investigators that he and Megan had worked together to plan the murders of their children. He also stated that the children were aware of their impending deaths and had even given their consent before being killed. Strangely, he denied having any role in the death of the family dog. In the confession, he revealed that the murders occurred 2 days before Christmas in 2019. He told the jury that upon discovering his wife and children dead, he attempted to end his life to join them. He described cutting his wrists, taking multiple doses of Benadryl, and attempting to hang himself multiple times. Additionally, he claimed that, since Megan had possession of all the phones in the house, he shouted for help from a window. When no one came, he said he had gone to a local store to purchase a gun and attempted to end his life. In his confession, Anthony also mentioned a suicide note that he and Megan had written together. In the note, they explained that their decision to end their lives arose from several factors, including their belief in an imminent end-of-the-world prophecy. They expressed that they did not want to endure the predicted suffering, catastrophic events, or prolonged torment. The note stated that death would free Megan from her pain and that their ultimate goal was to reunite as a family without experiencing suffering. In recounting his wife's death, Anthony told the court that she had taken a large amount of Benadryl and then attacked herself twice in the stomach. However, the autopsy report contradicted his account, indicating that the downward trajectory of the stab wound suggested they were inflicted by someone else. In 2022, the jury unanimously convicted Anthony Todt on 4 counts of murder. He was sentenced to 4 life terms in prison without the possibility of parole. In a rare decision, the judge added an additional year to his sentence for animal cruelty, as he was found responsible for killing the family dog. The case of Tara Baker. Tara Louise Baker was born on January 20, 1977, in East Point, Georgia. Her parents got divorced when she was a child, and her mother later married again. Tara had 2 younger brothers and a younger sister, making her the eldest of 4 siblings. From an early age, Tara showed a strong interest in the law and aspired to be a lawyer or judge. She demonstrated this by conducting mock trials with her stuffed animals, creating contracts with family members, and she also writing letters to politicians. She even wrote to the President of the United States once to complain about his speech interrupting her favorite TV show. After graduating from high school, Tara attended Georgia College, where she earned 2 bachelor's degrees in just 3 years, graduating early. She then enrolled at the University of Georgia in 1999 to pursue further education. The university, located in Athens, was one of the top law schools in the country and was conveniently close to her parents' home. Just a few hours away. Because not wanting to live in a dorm again, Tara opted for off-campus housing. She rented a room in a house that was divided into 3 separate rooms, sharing the space with 2 other university students, one of whom was a familiar face from her college days. Tara was employed at a respected law firm in downtown Athens, which enabled her to pay her living expenses and gain valuable work experience in her chosen field. In January 2001, at the age of 23 and in her 2nd year of studies, Tara spent a significant amount of time at the university library. The evening of January 18th followed this pattern. She and a friend went to the library, where they studied for several hours. Around 7:30 p.m., her friend left for home, but Tara chose to stay longer. At about 9:46 p.m., Tara called her friend to check that she had arrived home safely and mentioned her intention to leave the library in a few minutes. The next day, Virginia Baker, Tara's mother, got a phone call. The caller claimed to be a detective and asked if Tara had ever been arrested, explaining they needed her fingerprints. Virginia initially thought it was a prank call and hung up. But then she called the Athens police station to verify. They confirmed the caller was a real detective and told her there had been a fire at Tara's house. Virginia, still confused, asked to speak to Tara. The detective said they couldn't locate her and had found an unidentified body in the house, which is why they needed Tara's fingerprints. At the crime scene, investigators searched for evidence, but the room was badly damaged from the fire and water. It was later discovered that some items that survived the fire were not checked for fingerprints. Tara's laptop was missing from her room, which was unusual since it was a bulky item and other valuables were left untouched. This raised suspicions that the motive might not have been a robbery gone wrong. With no signs of forced entry, investigators suspected that Tara may have known her killer and let them in. The detective provided more information, stating that only one of Tara's roommates had been located so far, and that person was not at home when the fire occurred. However, the other roommate and Tara herself remained unaccounted for, leading investigators to suspect that the unidentified body might be one of them. When Virginia asked the detective to describe the room where the body was discovered, the response left her stunned. The detective explained that the room was packed with antique items, which was consistent with Tara's long-standing hobby of collecting such things. Tara's family rushed to Athens, hoping that the situation was a misunderstanding and that Tara was safe. Upon arrival at the police station, they were left waiting for hours without receiving any updates. Eventually, a detective met with them and delivered devastating news. The body found in the house was Tara's, and she had been murdered, not a victim of the fire. The detective, claiming exhaustion, declined to answer their questions at that time. However, before departing, he revealed that Tara had unknowingly left behind a crucial piece of evidence, fragments of the perpetrator's skin under her fingernails, which could potentially aid in identifying the killer. Tara's relatives were shocked and devastated by the news of her murder. The police refused to provide them with more information, despite their repeated pleas. Desperate for answers, the family made multiple attempts to contact the police, but were continually rebuffed. In fact, the police department never reached out to the family on their own, forcing Tara's relatives to repeatedly call and visit the station to gather scraps of information. Over time, they were able to slowly piece together some details of what had occurred. Tara's family discovered that firefighters may have inadvertently destroyed crucial evidence while extinguishing the blaze, a common occurrence in such situations. The firefighters' primary objective was to put out the fire and potentially rescue survivors, unaware that a murder victim was inside. Furthermore, the investigators failed to secure the crime scene after finding the body, allowing unauthorized access to the area. As Tara's relatives sought information, they faced resistance from the police, who were unwilling to keep them informed about the investigation. The family was also subjected to rudeness and unprofessional behavior from the authorities. In an effort to document their interactions, they began recording conversations with the police and filed complaints against local investigators, but this did not yield any results. The family decided to investigate Tara's death on their own and enlisted the help of a well-known criminologist. However, the local police department would only share case materials with him if he agreed to keep all information and findings confidential, even from Tara's family. For 10 years, the family was unable to obtain Tara's death certificate. They finally received it after writing to the state governor. But the certificate did not provide a detailed cause of death, only stating multiple injuries. Determining the exact time of death was difficult. Medical experts estimated it to be between 10 p.m., when Tara left the library, and 11 a.m., when neighbors called the fire department. However, it is likely that the crime occurred closer to the morning hours, as the fire did not take long to spread. The police investigation found witnesses who reported seeing a middle-aged white man running down the street on the morning of the murder. He was only wearing a t-shirt and jeans, which was unusual given the winter weather. Additionally, the police discovered that a few days before the murder, a man who sounded heavily intoxicated called Tara's university and asked for her phone number. The university had a phone number that students and faculty could call to request student information, such as phone numbers. The intoxicated-sounding man was only able to write down Tara's phone number correctly on his 8th attempt. The investigation into Tara's murder raised several suspicions, but the identity of the man involved remained unknown. At the time of her death, Tara was in a relationship with a boyfriend. Despite his confirmed alibi, the police were hesitant to clear him of suspicion. They continued to scrutinize him, making late-night calls to him and his parents, requesting that he travel to a nearby city for further questioning, DNA sampling, or a polygraph test. Notably, it was Tara's boyfriend who was tasked with identifying her body. He had been living in another city but promptly arrived in Athens upon learning of the fire, even though Tara's parents were already present in town. When the police asked the boyfriend to identify the body, they took him to the house but did not let him enter. A police officer went inside, took a photo of the body, and showed it to the boyfriend on the camera screen. The boyfriend was shocked and said he could not be certain if it was Tara. He mentioned that he had given her earrings, and if he saw them, he would know for sure. The officer went back inside, removed the earrings from the body, and showed them to the boyfriend. Only after seeing the earrings did the boyfriend confirm that the body was Tara's. The police then focused on another man, a student in Tara's classes with a troubling reputation. Several female students came forward and reported that this individual would often ask girls out on dates and not accept no as an answer. He had also asked Tara out multiple times, despite knowing she had a boyfriend. Some girls reported that he exhibited creepy behavior, making them feel uneasy. Despite investigating this person, detectives couldn't find any evidence connecting him to the crime. In a contentious move, they even asked Tara's friends to monitor him, but it yielded no results. Investigators also considered another suspect, an attorney at Tara's workplace. They discovered that just before the murder, he began acting strangely. This attorney had been part of a close-knit group of colleagues who regularly socialized outside of work. But he abruptly stopped participating in their gatherings. Moreover, just days before the incident, he had informed Tara that he would be unable to attend her birthday celebration, which was set to take place the day after the murder. On January 19th, before the fire began, one of Tara's colleagues attempted to persuade him to change his mind and attend the celebration, as Tara valued their friendship and was hurt by his sudden refusal. The colleague visited his office but found him absent, which was unusual given that his workday had already started. He was typically present in the office during morning hours, but not on that particular day. The colleague also checked his schedule, wondering if he had meetings, but it was empty. He failed to show up to work that day, but the following day, he visited another colleague's house and acted strangely. Many people who knew the attorney suspected he regularly used illicit substances, which may have contributed to his erratic behavior. However, another detail raised more suspicion. His colleague noticed several fresh scratches on his neck. It was previously discovered that skin particles from the perpetrator were found under Tara's nails, indicating she likely scratched her attacker. The attorney claimed the scratches on his neck came from a cat and denied any involvement in Tara's murder. His behavior became even more bizarre when asked who he thought committed the crime. He suddenly became agitated, shouting that it was Tara's father, but failed to provide any explanation or evidence to support this accusation. A further unusual circumstance was the sudden resignation of the attorney a few months after the murder, followed by his departure from the state. It remains unclear if the police ever compared his DNA to the samples found under the victim's fingernails or if these samples were even analyzed. As with other aspects of the investigation, the detectives did not disclose any information, not even to Tara's family. Subsequent police findings revealed that the attorney had been discreetly involved with two female colleagues from his workplace, despite the fact that he got married. This discovery could potentially explain his peculiar behavior and unexplained absences from work. Additionally, both women claimed they were certain he was using illegal substances. Police found no evidence linking the lawyer to the murder, clearing him as a suspect. A maintenance company with access to a spare key was also questioned, but yielded no results. The case has seen little progress, with authorities keeping investigation details confidential to avoid impeding progress. Over time, several potential leads emerged in the case. A witness came forward claiming to have seen an African-American man outside Tara's house a few hours before the fire. Another person mentioned noticing blood on a notebook belonging to one of Tara's university classmates shortly after the murder. Despite investigating these leads, police were unable to make any progress. Tara's parents offered a $77,000 reward for any information that could help solve the case. However, as the years passed, the team of detectives working on the case changed multiple times, and the new investigators were unable to crack the case. The primary challenge was the lack of evidence, as the fire and the subsequent actions of the firefighters destroyed nearly all potential evidence in Tara's room. In 2019, a podcast covering Tara's 19-year-old murder case was released, bringing together her family, key individuals, and all known information about the crime. This sparked renewed interest and caught the attention of the police department, who began communicating more with Tara's family. As a result, the police re-examined the case, although no new breakthroughs were made. The podcast continued to cover Tara's story for 2 years, ultimately having a substantial impact on the case's progression. The Georgia government introduced a bill to reduce the number of unsolved cases in the state, partly due to Tara's case. The bill was named after Tara and Rhonda Coleman, an 18-year-old woman from Georgia who was murdered in 1990 and whose killer remains unknown. Although the two murders are unrelated, the initiative was called the Coleman-Baker Bill. In 2023, the bill passed unanimously, and the governor signed it in Athens, accompanied by the families of both victims. The law created a special unit within the Georgia Bureau of Investigation to focus on unsolved cases. It also gave victims' families the right to ask police to re-examine these cases and take new steps to solve them. After the law passed in 2023, a unit was formed to investigate Tara's murder. Detectives re-reviewed all available information and re-examined the limited evidence using modern DNA analysis. This process took several months until a breakthrough was announced at a press conference on May 13, 2024. After 23 years, police revealed that the perpetrator had been caught. The culprit was identified as 48-year-old Edric Lamont Faust. Investigators did not reveal the exact methods used to identify him, but stated that advanced DNA analysis and biological evidence were crucial in the process. To avoid compromising the ongoing legal case, they withheld specific details, which will be disclosed during the trial. The arrest documents listed multiple charges against Edric, including assault, which may have allowed for a DNA match. Additionally, skin cells found under the victim's nails may have been analyzed using modern tools to extract the killer's DNA. As for Edric, his extensive criminal record, which included numerous arrests for various offenses, should have put him in the FBI database long ago. At the time of Tara's murder, Edric was 25 years old and lived in the same city as the victim. However, the police found no evidence to suggest that Edric knew Tara, leading them to believe he may have broken into her home or tricked her into letting him in. Edric was not a suspect in the case until a few days before his arrest, when new DNA analysis methods brought him to the attention of detectives. He is currently in jail awaiting trial. The evidence the police have against him will be revealed during the trial process. The fact that Edric was denied bail suggests that the detectives have obtained conclusive DNA evidence. The police are certain that Edric is responsible for Tara's murder, and as a result, her case is now officially closed. There is currently no verdict for Edric. He was charged with 1 count of premeditated murder, 4 counts of aggravated murder, 1 count of burglary, 2 counts of aggravated sodomy, 1 count of rape, 1 count of aggravated assault, first-degree arson, and possession of a knife during the commission of a felony. Tara's family finally has closure after 23 years of searching for the truth. They expressed gratitude to the new team of detectives who helped solve her case. In contrast, Rhonda Coleman's case, which the law is also named after, remains unsolved. However, her family may now feel hopeful that new evidence will be uncovered and justice will be served, just like in Tara's case. The case of Sophia McKenna. Sophia McKenna was born on March 7, 1996, in North Stonington, Connecticut. Growing up, Sophia had a happy and carefree childhood. She was a bright and energetic young girl. Sophia developed a close relationship with her siblings. They were from her mother Michelle's first marriage. When Sophia was around 6 or 7 years old, her parents went through a divorce. This event left a lasting impact on Sophia's emotional well-being, causing her significant emotional pain in the years that followed. Sophia was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, a mental health condition marked by severe mood swings during her high school years. The condition affected her mood, behavior. Although Sophia received treatment, including medication and therapy, there is no cure for the condition, which posed significant challenges for both her and her family. Bipolar disorder had a profound impact on Sophia's daily life, leading to unpredictable behavior and a chaotic lifestyle. Her relationships were often unstable and those around her struggled to cope with her condition. However, in 2015, Sophia met Austin, a charismatic and optimistic person who quickly captured her heart. Sophia and Austin had a volatile relationship due to Austin's aggression and anabolic steroid use for sports. They argued frequently, sometimes leading to physical fights. Sophia's mental health struggles often contributed to these conflicts. Austin's aggression left Sophia injured several times, requiring hospitalization. When Sophia discovered Austin's affair about a month before the incident, she decided to end the relationship, but they still saw each other occasionally. Sophia persevered through her struggles and continued to progress in life. As a young woman with striking features, she worked briefly as a model for a local company's jeans advertisements, which helped fund her education. Sophia eventually graduated as a licensed massage therapist and landed a job at the Red Door, a high-end spa in a luxury hotel. It was there that she met her 20-year-old coworker, Spencer Mugford. A beach lover and keen swimmer from Florida, Spencer was hired as a sailing instructor. Spencer and Sophia developed a strong connection due to their shared interests. They started dating, but their relationship was short-lived as their families did not approve of it, mainly because they were often surrounded by trouble. Michelle, Sophia's mother, was particularly concerned about her daughter's well-being as Sophia was frequently meeting Austin, an ex-boyfriend, and drinking alcohol, which had become a regular habit. In the end, Sophia's relationship with Spencer did not work out, and they decided to remain friends. The exact reason for their breakup is unclear, but it seems Sophia may have reunited with Austin. Despite this, Sophia and Spencer continued to spend a lot of time together, both at work and outside of work. Spencer and Sophia had always been intrigued by the mysterious lighthouse and decided to visit it on the eve of Memorial Day. Their trip, however, ended in an unexplained event. On June 8, 2018, a commercial fishing vessel near the Long Island Strait made a disturbing discovery. The crew spotted something unusual in the water, and upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a corpse. The fishermen quickly alerted the Coast Guard, who then notified the police. When the police arrived, they recovered the body of a young man from the shoreline and observed unexplained bruises and abrasions on the body. The deceased was later identified as Spencer Mugford, who, along with his girlfriend, Sophia McKenna, had been reported missing just a few days earlier. To understand what led to Spencer's death, his body underwent an autopsy. The results confirmed that Spencer had drowned, and experts did not find any signs of violence or assault. However, some details from the autopsy were kept undisclosed. In the same week that Spencer and Sophia went missing, 2 other men went missing in the same area. Their bodies were later discovered, and like Spencer, they had drowned. Initially, police believed that these incidents were unfortunate accidents caused by adverse circumstances. Remarkably, despite an extensive search, Sophia McKenna's body has not been found. On the night of May 27, 2018, in the small town of Groton, Connecticut. Although the investigation is ongoing, the case remains unsolved, leaving many questions unanswered. The story revolves around Sophia McKenna and Spencer Mugford, who decide to hike to the New London Lighthouse, located along the Thames River in a location considered mystical by locals. Built in 1909, this historic lighthouse has become famous for claims of paranormal activity involving Ernie, the first lighthouse keeper. According to local legend, Ernie's grief led to his tragic death after he jumped from the roof of the lighthouse following a painful breakup. Since then, locals and visitors have reported many strange occurrences. Mysterious events have included doors and windows opening for no apparent, sheets falling off beds, and radios turning on for no reason. Sailors have also reported mysterious incidents, such as boats leaving the shore on their own. As a result, the lighthouse has become a place of paranormal stories. The following Saturday, Sophia's friend Austin tried to reach her, but his calls and messages went unanswered. Initially, Austin wasn't concerned, knowing Sophia often slept in late. As the hours passed with no response, he started to worry and contacted Sophia's mother, Michelle. Michelle hadn't checked her phone because her younger daughter had been playing with it since morning. When she finally checked, she found 7 missed calls from an unknown number. Michelle attempted to call the number back, only to reach Spencer's voicemail, suggesting that the calls might have been from Sophia. Michelle attempted to contact Sophia but was unsuccessful. She and Austin then began a search. Austin called nearby hospitals, while Michelle filed a report with the police about a missing person. They also reached out to Spencer's family, who were equally worried since he had missed a significant family event and was unresponsive to their calls and messages. Michelle and Austin visited Spencer's apartment but found no indication that he had recently been there. The night before, Spencer's father learned that his son had met Sophia, which made him and his wife worried about the problems Sophia was having. Spencer's mother said that her son had planned to go fishing with a friend. The last time she spoke to Spencer was at 10 p.m. when her son said goodnight to her. Realizing that something was wrong, the Spencer family also reported their son and girlfriend missing to the police around 6:30 p.m. Police began searching for Sophia and Spencer. During the search, Austin contacted the sheriff to share some information about Sophia and Spencer's whereabouts the night before. He also told the sheriff that he had seen a video that Sophia had posted on Snapchat the night before. In the video, recorded on Spencer's phone, Sophia and Spencer can be seen having fun on a boat, heading towards the lighthouse. The footage shows a young man rowing towards the lighthouse. Everything seems normal. The photo taken before the incident shows Sophia posing playfully in front of the lighthouse with a concrete barrier and a "no passing" sign in the background. However, the events that unfolded just minutes after the photo was taken remain a complete mystery. Photos and videos were posted confirming that Sophia and Spencer were indeed at the lighthouse. This information prompted the police to dispatch 20 different Coast Guard units to the area. An extensive search was conducted by the Coast Guard, firefighters, and police, including air, sea, and land searches. The police's first major discovery was Sophia's car parked on a university campus, with her cell phone found inside. That night, the Coast Guard found a T-shirt that Spencer had been wearing in the video. Police theorized that Spencer may have used the T-shirt to secure a boat to shore. The search for Spencer and Sophia continued overnight and into the next day. However, a storm soon rolled in, prompting state authorities to temporarily halt the search until new information or clues about the Sophia and Spencer. This decision came as a shock to their families and friends, who refused to give up hope. They took matters into their own hands, plastering the city with posters and flyers featuring the missing duo's pictures. They also appealed to the public for any information that might aid in the search. Despite numerous witnesses in the area at the time of their disappearance, none came forward with any information. The family's private search efforts continued for days, but yielded no answers. Sophia likely chose not to report the incident to the police because she and Spencer had recently had run-ins with the law. Just days before, Spencer had been arrested for drunk driving, and Sophia had been charged with aggressive behavior. As a result, Sophia may have decided that it would be safer to seek help from her mother rather than seek police intervention. It is also possible that Sophia was in a state of panic and was not thinking clearly at the time. Without more information about her situation, it is difficult to say for sure why she made this decision. Police tried to piece together events on May 26, 2018. Memorial Day was coming up. Sophia was not working that day, but Spencer agreed to cover a coworker's shift from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. After work, the pair planned to meet up and attend the city's Lantern Festival together. Their plan was to spend the remainder of the day together, including a visit to a local lighthouse known for paranormal activity, which they were eager to experience. However, what happened after Spencer's shift is unclear. There is no information on who they met or where they went, and it is unknown if they had been drinking. It is known that Sophia's car was parked on the University of Connecticut campus around 2 a.m. Sophia left her cell phone in the car, possibly due to forgetfulness. Sophia's phone was dead, so she decided to leave it behind. Spencer and Sophia took a small sailboat from campus. The boat had no motor and weighed only 14 pounds, with oars as the only means of propulsion, and headed towards the lighthouse, navigating through treacherous rocky shores without safety equipment. That was all the information police had that night. On Monday evening, a police search helicopter spotted a white and blue sailboat stuck in the rocks about 7 miles west of the lighthouse. The boat was covered in dust, indicating it had been there for some time. Although it has not been confirmed, police believe the sailboat may be the one Spencer and Sophia took from campus. Fingerprints found at the scene of the boat were never examined or disclosed to the public, making it impossible to determine if they matched the fingerprints of the missing young couple, Sophia McKenna and Spencer Mugford. A major obstacle in the investigation was the unavailability of certain key evidence. Spencer's phone was never recovered, and the police did not obtain his cell operator records, making it impossible to confirm if any calls were made to numbers other than Michelle's on the night of the disappearance. Both the lighthouse and the campus have security cameras, but unfortunately they were not working on the night of the disappearance, and therefore did not capture any video of the event. Additionally, a serious mistake was made by the police in not investigating the lighthouse immediately after the couple went missing. To keep the case in the public eye, Sophia McKenna's family created a Facebook page called Searching for Sophia McKenna in July 2018. The page allowed the family to share updates, brochures, and pleas for information with the public. In a strange turn of events, a suspicious message was sent to Michelle from Sophia's social media account, requesting money, just weeks after the disappearance. This raised concerns about potential hacking, as the police had possession of Sophia's phone at the time. The investigation into Sophia's disappearance and Spencer's death has been closed. Police have been unable to come to a clear conclusion about what happened. On July 10th, a memorial service was held in Sophia's honor, organized by her family and friends. Angela Aguirre was born in 2002 into a loving and supportive family. Her parents, Angel Aguirre and Yerlis Yaguer, worked hard to provide their children with a good life. Angel, an engineer at a government company, was a strict yet caring father who always prioritized his family. Yerlis, a hairstylist, managed a small home-based salon where neighbors and even Angela's friends would often visit. Their home was always full of activity, with laughter, conversations, and the comforting sounds of daily life, creating a warm and welcoming atmosphere. Angela shared a special bond with her older sister, Natalie, who was not only family but also her confidant and best friend. They talked about their dreams, shared secrets, and supported each other through everything. In her free time, Angela enjoyed helping her mother in the salon, experimenting with makeup, creating new looks, and even doing manicures for her friends, who admired her talent. Angela was a sociable and charismatic young woman who made friends easily. Her charm and cheerful personality made her well-loved, and her sincerity and openness left a lasting impression on everyone she met. At the same time, she is also very reflective, often thinking about the future, her career aspirations, and how to achieve her goals. Her parents instilled in her the values of hard work, kindness, and generosity. Their home is a place filled with love and support, a space where everyone feels cared for. No one could have imagined that this happy, harmonious world would one day be shattered by a heartbreaking tragedy. Jose Alberto Cedeno came from a wealthy family. His father was a businessman and his mother had close connections in high society, which gave him privileges that most people could only dream of. He loves luxury properties, exclusive clubs, and travel, living a life completely different from the average person. Angela met Jose through mutual friends about 3 years prior. At first, she didn't pay any attention to him. But as they regularly attended group gatherings, they became casual acquaintances. To Angela, he was nothing more than another friend to hang out with in group settings. Jose, however, had more special feelings for her. He became persistent in his attempts to get closer to her, sending her frequent messages, asking her to hang out, and consistently finding ways to be around her. However, Angela did not return Jose's feelings. She only saw him as a friend, and his advances made her uncomfortable. Her close friends were aware that he had repeatedly asked her out, but she always turned him down. One evening, during a gathering with mutual friends, an incident occurred that further unsettled her. While they were hanging out by the pool, her friends playfully pushed her into the water. Wet and in need of something dry to wear, she asked Jose for help. Instead of helping her tactfully, he suggested going somewhere private, implying inappropriate intentions. She immediately refused and began to distance herself from him, avoiding any personal interactions. As time passed, Angela's discomfort around Jose grew. She confided in her friends, explaining that his persistence made her feel uneasy. They tried to reassure her, telling her to ignore him, but she could sense that his interest in her wasn't subsiding. Despite her unease, she couldn't completely avoid him due to their shared social circles, forcing her to tolerate his presence even as she became increasingly wary. On March 23, 2019, Angela woke up excited because it was her best friend's birthday, and she wanted to attend the party. She had already discussed it with her parents, but when she asked for permission, they firmly said no. Their reasoning was simple: her friend lived in an unsafe neighborhood, and they didn't want her to be in danger. She tried convincing them by offering to arrange a safe ride, but they refused to change their minds. Feeling disappointed, Angela messaged her friends to vent about her parents' strict rules. That same morning, she received a message from Jose, who was also celebrating his birthday. He invites her to his party, which begins at a private club and continues on La Terraquea Island, a secluded spot accessible only by boat. Angela was unsure at first, but this felt like an opportunity to have fun after missing her best friend's party. She decided to accept the invitation, although there was one catch: if she told her parents the truth that the party was on an island, they would almost certainly disapprove. So she decided to leave out a few details. That evening, Angela discussed her plans with her parents, assuring them that the gathering would take place in a safe location. She explained that the event would be small, private, and supervised by an adult chaperone who was a relative of the birthday host. Though hesitant, her parents didn't want to disappoint her again after having denied her request earlier in the day. Knowing Jose and realizing they couldn't completely isolate Angela from her friends, they reluctantly agreed. However, her father set strict conditions: no alcohol, regular phone check-ins, and a firm commitment to return home on time. As night fell, Angela prepared for the party. Standing in front of the mirror, she carefully selected her outfit, ultimately choosing comfortable shorts and a light blouse instead of a dress, ideal for an outdoor gathering. She neatly braided her hair and applied light makeup. The drive to the venue took about 15 minutes. Her father remained silent for most of the journey but reminded her, just before they arrived, to call him immediately if anything didn't feel right. When they reached the club, a small group of people had already gathered outside. Since Angela couldn't enter alone, she decided to wait. A few moments later, Jose appeared, smiling and relaxed. He greeted Angela but didn't acknowledge her father, who stood watching as she said a hasty goodbye and left with him. That brief goodbye would be the last time her parents would see her alive. When Angela met Jose outside the club, he quickly suggested that they head to La Terraquea Island. The island, located in the middle of the Caroni River, was remote and accessible only by boat. Jose assured her that the real party was happening there, that their friends were already gathered, and that they could enjoy the night without any limits. He promised her it was a safe place, with no strangers, only people he trusted. Jose pressured Angela to decide quickly, saying the boat was already waiting. He told her that if she truly wanted to make the most of the night, she shouldn't decline. Feeling conflicted, she realized that her options were either to join the group or stay behind alone, which might seem odd to everyone. In the end, she decided to go. At the dock, a boat was waiting to take them to the island. It belonged to Jose's godfather, Jose Zarilla, an older man and a well-known businessman. Despite his age, Zarilla still socialized with younger people and organized events like this. On board were several others: his son Glauder Zarilla, Glauder's girlfriend Jocelyn Barreto, and two family friends, Orlando Salazar and Wilmer Diaz. All of them were significantly older than Angela. As the boat left the city lights behind, the group laughed, talked loudly, and excitedly discussed the night ahead. Bottles of wine were passed around freely, with no regard for discretion or moderation. La Terraquea Island, their destination, was famous as a party spot. While there were no permanent buildings, the area had been specially prepared for celebrations, complete with a bar, a dance floor, and lounge sections designed to host large groups. It was a place with no oversight, where anything could happen. After the boat arrived at the shore, the group headed toward the center of the island, where music was blasting. Tables were set up with drinks, and the smell of alcohol and tobacco permeated the atmosphere. The energy was vibrant. Some people danced, others sat laughing at tables, and a few were already visibly intoxicated. The group quickly immersed themselves in the festive atmosphere. Drinks were served continuously, and each glass was refilled swiftly, with no one paying much attention to how much they were drinking. Angela was at the center of attention, surrounded by people. There was always someone raising a toast with her, pulling her into conversations, or encouraging her to enjoy the party. Time flew by as the music got louder and the party showed no signs of slowing down. Guests drifted between the bar and the dance floor, lounged around, and made plans for later in the night. As time passed, Jose stayed close to Angela, ensuring she was never alone, engaging her in conversation, and offering her more drinks. As the night wore on, the party became increasingly chaotic, with no sense of order or control. The group continued celebrating, losing track of time and their surroundings. Some guests kept dancing, others wandered off into the darkness, and the crowd scattered across the island. The festivities stretched deep into the night, becoming more disorganized as the hours passed. People moved aimlessly, blending into the crowd. The music was overpowering, the drinking was unrestrained, and no one noticed the time or who was coming or going. By this point, it had become nearly impossible to keep track of interactions or even who was still on the island. The last time Angela was seen was just before midnight. She had been moving between the dance floor, the bar, and the shoreline, socializing and drinking. At some point, though, she disappeared. Some people assumed that Angela might have stepped away for a while to find some peace and quiet, distancing herself from the noise. Initially, this didn't raise much concern, as guests often wandered around the island, relaxing on the beach or seeking quieter spots. However, as time went on, people began to realize she had disappeared without a trace. No one could recall the exact moment she disappeared, and at the time, no one tried to find out where she had gone. Some partygoers assumed she had left early or caught a boat back with someone else, but no one confirmed this. Nobody searched the area, called out for her, or tried to contact her by phone. By that point, her phone was no longer responding, but this didn't concern anyone. As the party wound down, the music faded, and guests began to leave, it became evident that Angela was not there. However, no one took the initiative to look for her, contact her family, or report her missing. Perhaps they didn't want to draw attention or were afraid of the consequences. Under the influence of alcohol, the group took the situation lightly. Everyone assumed someone else would handle it, but in reality, no one did. When it was time to leave the island, no one stayed behind to look for her. Nobody suggested waiting until morning, checking the surrounding area, or searching the river. The remaining guests boarded the boat and departed, leaving the dark, empty island behind. Meanwhile, Angela's parents were desperately waiting for 8 p.m., the time they were supposed to pick her up. Her father, worried, left early and drove to the parking lot of the club where she had said the party would be. Upon arriving, he called her to let her know he was there, but she didn't answer. Her phone rang, but there was no response. He waited a few minutes and tried calling again, with the same result. At first, he wasn't overly alarmed and assumed she hadn't heard the phone because of the music or had left it in her bag. He waited patiently, but as the minutes passed, his concern grew. He kept calling repeatedly, but Angela never answered. After 30 minutes, Angela's father, Angel, called his wife to check if Angela had reached out to her. She answered, her voice filled with concern, and said she hadn't heard from their daughter since she left the house earlier that evening. Realizing Angela wasn't at the club, her parents began contacting her friends, hoping someone would know where she was. To their shock, none of her friends had seen her at the club that night. Growing more desperate, they called others who might have been at the party, but no one could provide any useful information. They couldn't comprehend what was happening, but one thing was clear: something was wrong. Over the next few hours, they tried calling Angela 56 times, but her phone remained unreachable. At around 2 a.m., their phone finally rang. An unknown number appeared on the screen. Her father answered immediately, hoping to hear her voice. Instead, it was Jose's mother on the line. The words she spoke felt like a nightmare. Angela fell off the boat. Angela's parents were devastated. What boat? Angela had told them she was attending a party at a club. How could she have ended up on the water? When they demanded an explanation, Jose's mother sounded uncertain and hesitant, as though even she didn't fully understand what had occurred. Something was terribly wrong. Their instincts told them this situation was far more serious than they were being told. Why was this the first they were hearing of it? Why hadn't anyone called earlier? If their daughter had fallen into the water, why hadn't someone raised the alarm immediately? Every explanation they received only heightened their fear. They knew something horrible had happened, but they couldn't yet grasp the full extent of the tragedy awaiting them. After receiving that late-night call from Jose's mother, Angela's parents felt their worst fears materializing. They didn't know all the details, but one thing was clear: the situation was dire. Their daughter was missing, and no one had taken any steps to find her. Desperate to act quickly, they clung to the hope that it wasn't too late. By 4 a.m., determined and without hesitation, they went to the police and demanded an immediate search. Instead of urgency, they were met with indifference. The officers explained that a person isn't officially considered missing until 72 hours have passed, so no search could begin before then. They think that Angela might have just lost track of time, her phone might have run out of battery, or she could simply be relaxing. However, her parents knew very well that she would never disappear like this. Each passing minute without action is like letting time slip away. Time has the power to change everything. Angela's disappearance was completely out of character. She never disappeared without informing her parents, always kept her phone turned on, and always honored her commitments. Yet, the police refused to listen. Knowing they couldn't wait, they resolved to take matters into their own hands. Angela's father went directly to Jose's family home to demand answers. He wanted to know who had been with his daughter, where she was last seen, and who witnessed her falling from the boat. The responses he received were vague and evasive. Meanwhile, her mother was calling all of her friends, desperately hoping someone could offer answers. Yet none of them even knew Angela had been on the island. That realization crushed them. It meant she had deliberately hidden her plans from everyone. Realizing phone calls alone would not be enough, the parents turned to social media for help. By 6 a.m., they began posting Angela's photo, a description of her, and details of her last known location, pleading for any information. The posts quickly went viral. Strangers shared their plea, sent messages of support, and even volunteered to assist in the search. Several people who saw the posts remembered a large group on the island the previous night. They recalled young men and women partying, drinking, and among them, a girl resembling Angela. At the time, no one paid much attention, but now those images take on a much more disturbing meaning. Angela's parents realized they could no longer wait for the authorities to act. They immediately went to the dock where the boat departed for the island. There, they tried to question the staff about who had been operating the vessel and whether anything unusual had occurred. However, they were met with silence. No one had tracked the boat's trips that night, and there were no patrols recording departures after 5 p.m., even though nighttime travel was strictly forbidden. As Angela's parents frantically sought answers, her story went viral on social media. The public was outraged, demanding immediate action and urging authorities to begin search efforts. Despite the lack of an official response, Angela's family pressed on with their own investigation. They organized a group of volunteers and began searching the riverbanks, aware that time was critical. But the truth they were about to uncover was far worse than they had feared. The search for Angela lasted 3 days. On the morning of March 26th, at 7 a.m., local fishermen discovered a body tangled in branches near the riverbank. The location was several miles upstream from where Angela had reportedly fallen from the boat. News of the discovery quickly reached the authorities. An investigative team arrived soon after, and within hours, Angela's parents received heartbreaking confirmation. The body was that of their daughter. The initial investigation only made the mystery even more confusing. Angela was found wearing a wetsuit and a life jacket, making it highly improbable that her death had resulted from an accidental drowning. Official reports noted that if she had fallen into the river, the current would have carried her downstream. Yet, her body was discovered upstream, defying fundamental hydrodynamic principles. This strongly suggested she could not have drowned at the location described by witnesses. A preliminary forensic examination revealed significant physical injuries. Bruises and lacerations on her head and face indicated severe blunt force trauma. Further evidence pointed to an aggressive assault. While the official cause of death was listed as drowning, the report suggested Angela might have been unconscious when she entered the water. For her parents, the discovery was devastating. They had feared something was wrong but could never have imagined the extent of the violence that had led to her death. Authorities were slow to respond, with police officials dodging direct explanations. Meanwhile, Angela's family refused to remain silent. They issued public statements, demanding justice and accountability for those involved. As details from the forensic report circulated on social media, public outrage erupted. Many suspected foul play and a subsequent cover-up to protect the perpetrators, but Angela's family vowed to uncover the truth. The initial forensic findings were clear. Angela had suffered physical trauma, sustained head injuries, and had been unconscious before drowning. Yet, these conclusions appeared inconvenient for certain individuals. Just 2 days after the autopsy results were released, authorities announced a second forensic examination with an entirely different conclusion. The revised report claimed there was no evidence of foul play and attributed Angela's injuries to her body striking rocks in the water. Her death was reclassified as a tragic accident. According to this version, Angela had fallen into the river on her own, and her life jacket had failed to function properly. This sudden change has caused widespread anger and suspicion. Angela's parents rejected the revised narrative outright, questioning how such drastic changes could emerge in just a few days. How could the original findings of violent assault and trauma be disregarded? And most confounding of all, how could someone wearing a life jacket drown? These unanswered questions left Angela's family, and much of the public, deeply suspicious. Her parents openly accused the authorities of corruption, alleging that those responsible were being protected by powerful individuals. They called for an independent investigation and demanded that a new forensic analysis be conducted by international experts. Social media erupted with outrage as people became convinced there was an attempt to cover up the case. Many believed powerful figures had intervened to suppress the evidence. The protests quickly extended beyond the digital sphere, and public pressure surged. Angela's parents remained steadfast, knowing their fight was not only for their daughter but also for countless other families left powerless in the face of a system plagued with corruption and impunity. The case quickly attracted intense media attention. Independent media investigations exposed widespread corruption in the Venezuelan justice system. These investigations uncovered discrepancies in witness testimonies, alterations in official documents, and the disappearance of critical evidence. The situation became more tense when a reputable newspaper revealed shocking information. The suspects' families had tried to bribe their way into closing the case. They were allegedly offered $100,000 in cash and 3 kilograms of gold to achieve this goal. This information has caused widespread public outrage, sparking demands for dismissal, arrest, and fair handling on a broad scale. The protests soon reached the streets. Angela's case had transformed into a powerful symbol of the fight against corruption and impunity. Months of relentless public pressure finally forced the case into court. However, Venezuelan authorities made an unusual decision. The trial would be held behind closed doors. Journalists, activists, and even Angela's family were barred from attending. It became increasingly evident that her family was under significant pressure. Her parents began receiving threatening phone calls and warnings to stop seeking justice. Anonymous messages were sent to them, and strangers were seen loitering near their home. Despite these formidable challenges, the trial moved forward. Jose Alberto Cedeno and his godfather, Jose Zorrilla, were sentenced to 29 years in prison after being found guilty of aggression and criminal acts. However, the most astonishing aspect of the verdict was that every other guest at the party was completely acquitted. None of them faced consequences for covering up the crime or failing to act when Angela disappeared. This decision outraged the public, who demanded true justice, insisting it was inconceivable that only 2 individuals were responsible for the crime. Angela's parents attempted to appeal the verdict, but the court rejected their arguments. Although the trial is over, justice has not yet been fully served. The convictions of Jose and Zorrilla brought no sense of closure, only more questions. Angela's parents were haunted by the acquittal of the other guests, firmly believing that more people were involved. Yet, the case was declared closed, and the justice system acted as though its work was done. Refusing to give up, Angela's parents filed an appeal, calling for a new investigation and accountability for everyone present on the island that night. They demanded further interrogations and access to withheld case evidence. However, their efforts were met with resistance. The authorities showed little interest in reopening the case, and crucial evidence that could have implicated others was either missing or ignored. Numerous questions lingered. Why was Angela's body discovered in a location inconsistent with an accident? How could she have drowned while wearing a life jacket? Why didn't her friends begin searching for her immediately? Who caused her injuries? What truly happened that night? These questions remained unanswered, leaving the case steeped in mystery and doubt. Months passed, yet the case remained stagnant. Angela's parents continued their relentless fight for answers but were repeatedly met with denials and obstruction. The more the authorities attempted to suppress the investigation, the more the public suspected that the whole truth had yet to come to light. The case of Nathan and Crystal Maddox. In Colmasneil, a small town in Tyler County, Texas, with a population of just 563 people, Nathan Maddox and Kristen Westfall's relationship progressed quickly. They lived on nearby streets and shared milestones like their first love and first kiss. Despite their strong bond, Kristen's parents disapproved and tried to end the relationship. Torn between her love and her parents, Kristen initially chose her family. However, everything changed when she discovered she was pregnant. Faced with this reality, her parents decided to accept the situation and permitted the couple to marry, as single motherhood was socially unacceptable. Nathan and Kristen got married in Texas. Shortly after, they bought a house and welcomed their first child, a daughter named Madison. However, family life wasn't as idyllic as in the movies. Nathan had to work hard to support them. Owning and maintaining a house was expensive. So he took a job in Montana, away from home. As a young husband and father, he tried to visit Kristen and Madison as often as possible. He regularly sent money home, believing that he had a happy family waiting for him. He loved Kristen and Madison and thought they were the perfect little family. One day, when he returned home from Montana, he immediately noticed the house was empty. Most of the belongings were gone, and there was a note on the kitchen table. In a few brief lines, Kristen informed that she was leaving. Her reason seemed odd. She claimed she didn't know where her husband was, who he was with, or when he would return. She wrote that she was unhappy, but this was untrue because Kristen knew Nathan was in Montana for work. He called regularly to check on her and their daughter, and he sent them money regularly. The most painful part was that she took Madison with her, and Nathan was now forbidden from seeing his daughter. Kristen did something very unkind. She went to the police station and provided false information to gain full custody of her daughter, claiming that the child's father was not supportive or interested. Nathan was aware that his ex-wife and daughter had moved back to her parents' home. He made several attempts to visit his daughter Madison, but the Westfall family was firm in their refusal. They were happy to have gotten rid of an unwanted son-in-law. As time went by, Nathan moved back to his hometown to be closer to his daughter. He continued his efforts to see her and understood that he needed to work with a lawyer to gain official custody and arrange legal visitations. During this challenging time, he met with Crystal again. They had known each other since childhood, having attended school together. As teenagers, their lives took different paths. Crystal moved to the big city, dreaming of graduating from university. However, in her final year, she got married. Instead of pursuing a successful career, she enjoyed a happy family life and had 4 children. Unfortunately, over time, her marriage deteriorated, leading to a divorce. In 2011, Crystal returned to her hometown with her children. Crystal and Nathan, longtime friends, reunited at a crucial moment for both. Nathan was captivated by Crystal's children and admired how she interacted with them. Her boundless energy and optimism lit up everything around her, like a fairy. Nathan and Crystal got married in 2013. Nathan worked at the Lack and Industries warehouse, while Crystal started a small clothing business, opening a children's clothing boutique under her own name and selling handmade jewelry. The business was doing very well, which allowed them to afford a good lawyer to seek visitation rights or custody of Nathan's daughter from his first marriage. Madison was delighted with her father's new wife and her new siblings, and she felt completely happy in her father's home. This made Lita and Paula Westfall, Kristen's parents, very resentful and worried about losing their only granddaughter. In 2012, Kristen Westfall requested full custody of her daughter in court. With her parents' support, the custody battle dragged on for 2 long years. The Westfall family was hoping to gain full custody quickly, but Crystal's arrival in Nathan's life changed the whole situation. A complete family, a home, and a good job made a strong case in court, and Nathan was granted visitation rights with his daughter. In October 2013, the judge allowed Nathan and Crystal to have supervised visits with Madison. On January 18, 2014, Nathan and Crystal arrived at Mount Carmel Church for the Sunday service. After the service, they wanted to take a walk with Madison, who was 6 years old. They left the church a little ahead of the rest of the congregation to go get some gifts they had prepared for Madison from their car. A few minutes later, 3 loud gunshots rang out. Nathan and Crystal were tragically killed by gunshots to the head, shocking their small town with the brutal murder of them. Initially, the killings seemed senseless, but later investigations revealed a motive. The police conducted a thorough investigation at the scene, where they found a .30 caliber rifle and matching shell casings. The autopsy of Nathan showed he was also shot in the thigh with a 20-gauge shotgun. This discovery led investigators to believe there were 2 shooters, since it's unlikely that one person could have managed both weapons simultaneously. The investigators carried out a set of interviews with witnesses to collect information about the Maddox family and to understand what occurred. They spoke with church members, friends, and relatives of the deceased family. However, the most surprising aspect was the response from Nathan's ex-wife's family. Both Kristen and her parents, along with other witnesses, were summoned to give testimony at the police station. The attitude of this family really shocked the investigators. The Westfalls played up the tragedy so much that it seemed like they were hiding their happiness about the deaths. Paul Westfall was so stunned that he had a fit. He couldn't believe the news of Nathan's death and had to call emergency services. A grown man who spent years trying to cut Nathan out of his daughter's life was so devastated he suffered a seizure. Kristen was the first person interviewed, and her interview was somewhat unsettling. She was the only family member who remained calm and composed, even though she and Nathan had been together for a long time and had a child. Kristen shared some strange details about him, focusing only on the negative aspects of her ex-husband. She claimed to know who killed him, mentioning that Nathan was involved with dangerous motorcycle gangs in Montana. One day, one of the alleged gang members showed up at Nathan's mother's house and threatened to kill him. Although the story was partly true, the threat didn't materialize because a motorcyclist inadvertently broke his bike. It was also found out that the existence of the gang had been exaggerated to throw off the investigation. Moreover, as an alibi, Kristen stated that on the day of the crime she was at the supermarket with her dad, Paul, just a few miles from the church, and then they both went home. Surveillance footage at 10:57 a.m. confirmed they were at the supermarket. Paul Westfall told exactly the same story. However, because Paul was a hunter and owned a firearm, they tested his hands for gunshot residue, but the results were negative. Still, his reaction to Nathan's death, whom he openly hated, seemed very strange to the investigators, leaving them slightly doubtful about his sincerity. Interviews with Nathan's loved ones over a short period revealed that he was in a custody battle with his ex-wife Kristen Westfall and her family over their daughter. After a long and bitter court dispute, Nathan was close to gaining custody, which the Westfall family strongly opposed. This intense conflict could have led to retaliation, but the police lacked concrete evidence to arrest anyone from the Westfall family. The family consisted of 4 people, and 2 of them could be the shooters. Investigators were still not convinced by their story and were trying to determine which family member fired the shots that killed 2 people. Regardless of whether it was a hired assassin, the investigators took a different approach and decided to focus on the main figure of the controversy, little Madison. After all, her safety was at risk, and she was still with a family that could be dangerous to her. Police officers and Child Protective Services, CPS, arrived to take the girl from the Westfalls' home, but were met with strong protests and anger. Due to the actions of the older Westfall family members, a search of the house was conducted. During this search, the police made a shocking discovery. A gun was stored on a shelf in a room where it could be easily reached. The search concluded with the discovery of illegal drugs throughout the house. In 2013, Kristen Westfall was charged and arrested for possessing a controlled substance. She faced repeated arrests, suggesting she couldn't be a fit mother to Madison. When Kristen went to jail in early 2013, her parents were given temporary custody of her daughter and did not permit Nathan to visit Madison during this period. Kristen defied Child Protective Services orders and continued living in the same house and sharing a bed with her young daughter. Even in 2014, despite court injunctions, she remained with her family and saw her daughter daily, disregarding the court's directive to move out. In March 2014, Child Protective Services got involved in the custody case of Madison, less than 2 months after the tragic murder in front of the church. Authorities arrested 4 people: Kristen Westfall, 29, her younger brother Cameron, and their parents, Paul and Letha Westfall. There was no direct evidence of their guilt in murder. The interrogations didn't yield the expected results, so the police resorted to deceptive tactics to pressure the most vulnerable member of the Westfall family, 18-year-old Cameron. If his guilt was proven, he was told that all his family members would face life imprisonment and the direct perpetrators of the murder would receive the death penalty. Cameron was young and kind-hearted. He was really scared and quickly agreed to cooperate with the investigation, revealing all the details of what had happened. The crime against Nathan and Crystal turned out to be meticulously planned by the Westfall family to completely exclude Nathan from the role of a father. The Westfalls were worried and carefully planned a scheme to keep Nathan out of Madison's life. Nathan wanted to take care of his daughter on his own, but the Westfalls were unwilling to let him see her, much less grant him permanent custody. The Westfalls were really upset that their ex-son-in-law had gotten his life together and was living well. So, when the judge allowed him multiple visits, it became clear that he might win the case. This led Kristen to come up with a plan to get rid of him once and for all. Initially, Kristen tried to hire someone to kill her ex-husband, but when that didn't work out, she decided to do it herself with her father. On Sunday afternoon, the family usually attended church, and January 18th was no different. Letha Westfall and little Madison drove to the service at the scheduled time. Afterward, Letha had to hand Madison over to her father. Meanwhile, Kristen and Paul went to a distant store and pretended to be customers to appear on CCTV cameras, trying to establish a solid alibi, but they miscalculated the timing. Each family member had a specific role to fulfill. Throughout the entire period, they communicated via text messages, updating each other on Nathan and Crystal's movements. Letha, who attended the service, informed Paul when Nathan and Crystal were about to leave the church. She also the one who called 911 immediately after the murder. Cameron played a key role in hiding the evidence. He disposed of the gun used by his sister and father to shoot the newlyweds in the head near a remote church. He drove to a lake and threw away a bag of weapons. Cameron later decided to cooperate with the authorities and revealed that Kristen initially came up with the plan, which the family followed. He also showed investigators the spot where he had thrown away the murder weapons. Divers eventually recovered these items, confirming Cameron's statement. The police arrested Kristen, Cameron, and their parents, Paul and Letha Westfall, charging them with organized crime. Kristen and Paul fired the shots, while Cameron and Letha willingly assisted them. Since Letha was at the church during the incident, she clearly did not shoot Nathan and Crystal Maddox. However, phone records revealed that she informed her daughter and spouse of the couple's location as they left the church. Although Kristen and Paul pulled the trigger, Letha and her son Cameron were knowingly involved in the crime. The trial was noisy and prolonged. Each Westfall family member was tried individually. Paul Westfall pretended to have seizures and was deemed mentally unfit, staying in a state psychiatric hospital for evaluation. In May 2014, a judge ruled Paul incompetent, but this decision was reversed 4 months later. Facing with threat the death penalty for the murders of Nathan and Crystal Maddox, Paul and Letha accepted a plea deal with the district attorney's office to avoid execution. Paul accepted a plea deal from the prosecution, resulting in a life sentence without the possibility of parole after pleading guilty to the charges. Letha also accepted a plea deal and admitted to participating in organized criminal activity, avoiding a trial. She is currently imprisoned at Mountain View Prison in Gatesville and will be eligible for parole in 2044. At the time of her sentencing, Letha Westfall was 54 years old, which means she may spend the rest of her life in prison. Kristen is the third person from the Westfall family to be tried in this case. During the trial, she maintained her innocence against all charges. She claimed that her entire family was unstable, and she was the only one honest about it. When her family members, Letha, Paul, and Cameron, testified against her in court, she couldn't confront them directly. Kristen Westfall's final trial and sentencing started in August 2016. The reason for killing Nathan and Crystal was related to the custody of Madison. Kristen strongly opposed Nathan having unrestricted access to see Madison. She couldn't bear the thought of him being happy. Kristen wanted to manage the communication between her daughter and Nathan herself. Through their daughter, she aimed to control everything he did and felt. The trial lasted more than a week. Ultimately, with overwhelming evidence against her, the jury took 8 hours to find her guilty of capital murder. In a Brazos County courtroom, attorneys and the judge reviewed final motions for the woman. Kristen was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, nearly 9 months before her father pleaded guilty and received the same sentence in May 2017. Kristen Westfall is currently serving her sentence at the William Hobby Women's Prison in Falls County, Texas. Paul, Letha, and Kristen Westfall were charged with 2 counts of murder. However, the youngest family member, Cameron, was only charged with 2 counts of tampering with or fabricating physical evidence. Cameron pleaded guilty to 2 counts of third-degree evidence tampering. The judge postponed his sentencing based on Cameron's agreement to testify against his family. He could face up to 10 years in prison for each charge. He was reportedly not involved in the shooting, and his mother was not involved either, as she was at the church when the crime happened. However, phone records indicate that she texted her husband and daughter while the Maddoxes were getting ready to go home. Cameron is currently imprisoned at the Huntsville Correctional Facility in Huntsville, Texas, and is expected to be released in 2025. The case of Tracy Roberts. In 1998, the Tracy Roberts family relocated from Chicago to the small town of Early, Iowa. The couple, Tracy and Michael, were in their second marriages and each had a son from previous relationships. Tracy was American, while Michael was originally from Australia. They were seen as a respectable young family by the local community. Michael was a computer expert who ran an IT business from home, with many innovative ideas he aimed to pursue. Tracy is an active and sociable housewife who enjoys sports. The couple met online and got married just 18 days after meeting in person. They have since had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and appear to be a very happy family. Many people admired Michael's determination, including his neighbor Mona, a real estate broker with whom they had completed several successful transactions. Mona was eager to continue working with Michael. She said that her 20-year-old son, Dustin, was very private and had a hard time keeping a job. He had tried many different positions but had not been able to hold any for long. Michael suggested that help Dustin discover his strengths. Later, he began teaching Dustin the basics of business. He took him on trips and supported him in attending church. Michael was generally seen as kind, pleasant, and empathetic, while his wife was regarded as sweet and sociable. They raised 3 children together, with Tracy managing the household and children while Michael focused on work, often traveling for business. However, an unexpected situation happened to Tracy's family. On the evening of December 13th, 2001, in the town of Early, Tracy was in the kitchen preparing dinner with her children. While the food was being heated, she was also bathing her 1-year-old daughter upstairs. Meanwhile, her 2 older boys, ages 3 and 11, were watching television in the older boy's bedroom. Suddenly, the boys were startled by a piercing scream from their mother. The eldest, Bert, rushed to see what was happening. He saw Tracy trying to enter the room, but someone grabbed her by the hair and pulled her back into the hallway. Holding her baby daughter, Tracy managed to hand her over to Bert before a struggle with the attacker ensued. Tracy slammed the door shut behind her, and the boys could hear the sounds of a struggle and their mother's muffled cries for help. Terrified and unsure of what to do, Bert listened as the noises escalated. Then, after a brief silence, a shot rang out. During the attack, Tracy managed to defend herself against the criminals. One was killed, and the other escaped. Bert called 911 around 7 p.m., reporting that strangers had broken into their home and attacked his mother. Police officers took the call seriously and rushed to the address. It was unclear what had happened to Tracy and her 3 children at that time. Paramedics then arrived to find the children sobbing and Tracy repeatedly shouting that an intruder was still upstairs and pointing towards the stairs. However, as per protocol, paramedics could not enter the house until police had confirmed that the house was secure. The police arrived and went up to the 2nd floor where they found a young man lying dead in a pool of blood. There was no one else in the room. Tracy was quickly placed in an ambulance by a doctor and taken to the nearest medical center. The scene revealed a shocking crime. The entire family was overwhelmed and confused by the situation. The police began an investigation to shed light on this complicated situation. The small town where the incident occurred was a quiet and peaceful community of about 500 residents, all of whom knew each other well. The police began their investigation by questioning Bert, the eldest son. Bert had witnessed an attack on his mother. The attacker had pulled her hair back. Stunned, the boy knew he had to act to protect himself and the other children, so he grabbed a baseball bat, ready to fight off anyone who entered his room. When the chaos died down, he could only hear his mother breathing heavily. Finally, he heard the voices of 2 men outside starting to bang on the door. In fear, the boy began to scream, trying to scare the intruders away. Outside, the men shouted about having guns, and then several shots were fired. Suddenly, his mother opened the door. Bert was relieved that it was finally over. He then called 911. After hearing about the incident, Mona rushed to the scene. She was looking for her 20-year-old son, Dustin, a family friend. His car was parked in a private driveway, but when she arrived, the entire area, including Dustin's car, was cordoned off. She was not allowed into Tracy's house. Mona asked the officers about her son's condition, but they told her that he was dead. Dustin was found lying in a pool of blood near a 2nd-floor bedroom. Tracy had shot him during a struggle. The police did not share any further information with Mona. Tracy woke up in a hospital 20 kilometers from her home. She had injuries to her neck that suggested she had been strangled. Tracy told the police what had happened that night. While she was bathing her daughter on the 2nd floor, she heard noises downstairs. Thinking that her husband had returned early from a business trip, she went down to check. But she discovered 2 men. When they started to go upstairs, Tracy quickly took her daughter to Bert's room and left the 3 children in the room. She then tried to enter the room and close the door, but one of the men grabbed her hair and dragged her into the hallway. Then one of the attackers used her jeans to strangle her. During the struggle, Tracy lost consciousness and the attackers lost focus. When she regained consciousness, she heard screaming outside the door. Realizing this was her chance to escape, She got up and ran to the gun safe next to the bed in the master bedroom. Although the attackers chased her, she managed to turn a few numbers and retrieve a gun. Tracy aimed at them and pulled the trigger, but nothing happened because the safety was still on. The attackers were caught off guard, allowing her to fire again after removing the safety. The loud bang stunned her, and she continued to fire at the attackers until the room filled with smoke. Tracy didn't see the criminals, but she heard someone running away from the house. One of the criminals fell, while the other managed to escape. She also heard her frightened children calling her name, so she rushed into the room and opened the door. In a moment of panic, her son swung a bat at her, trying to protect himself, and she narrowly avoided being hit. The most important thing was that the children were safe. As the smoke cleared in the main bedroom, Tracy saw Dustin, a 20-year-old, lying on the floor but still alive. He began to get up, and in her shock, she grabbed the gun and ordered him to stay down, desperate for everything to stop. She yelled at him not to move, but Dustin, who was the son of her friend Mona, didn't listen. He stood up and approached her. Worried for her and the children's safety, she fired several shots, and Dustin fell to his death. Tracy recounted that earlier that day, Dustin visited their home. When he discovered that her husband was away on a business trip, he lingered on the porch for a long time, seemingly unwilling to leave. His behavior was unusual, and Tracy ultimately had to shut the door in his face. The Tracy described a second participant in the crime as tall, with dark hair, around 30 years old, but she never saw his face. That evening, Tracy's husband, Michael, was on a business trip in Minneapolis. It was unclear why Dustin, whom Michael was helping, would attack Tracy and their children. The second killer was still at large, raising fears that he might return for revenge. This left Tracy feeling fearful, she unable to sleep because she was worried about her family's safety. The police had a hard time identifying the second suspect, based only on the vague description provided by Tracy. They began investigating Dustin's social connections to determine who might have accompanied him to Tracy's family home. Many people consider Tracy a hero. She gave many interviews to journalists. In front of the cameras, she and her husband, Michael, held hands, and she calmly said that she did what she had to do to protect her family, and the whole hall applauded. Many people thought that her actions were justified. Tracy was brave. She could protect not only herself but also her children. The police were wary of accepting anyone's testimony without evidence, so they began a thorough investigation of the events surrounding the case, finding the story unconvincing. Mona was going through the most difficult time of her life and was heartbroken. To her, the circumstances of her son's murder, as Tracy described them, were meaningless. She was haunted by nightmares of the attack that took her son's life. Mona, the mother of the young man who was shot, spoke to the media about her shock over the incident. She described Dustin as a kind person who had never shown aggression and had no criminal history. There was no reason for him to attack the Tracy family. However, Dustin had to see a psychologist with his mother. He had difficulty making friends at school, was often bullied, and was excluded from parties and celebrations. Despite seeing many doctors, they gave him different diagnoses without clear answers. Could his social difficulties lead to a moment of loss of control? Tracy told the police that she had always feared Dustin. She felt extremely unsafe, even around her husband, and she tried to avoid any encounters with Dustin. Under no circumstances would she let him be alone with the children because she believed he would harm them. Mona was shocked by these allegations. She had no idea that Tracy was facing such serious issues with her son. To Mona, everything seemed just the opposite. The police examined the crime scene and concluded that there was no clear motive for the violent attack. They suggested that it could only make sense if it had been planned as a robbery. The Tracy house contained many valuables, leading Tracy to believe that the young criminals aimed to steal cash or one of Michael's collectible weapons. However, the criminals' behavior did not resemble that of typical robbers. They ignored money and jewelry that were easily visible, and instead of trying to steal from Tracy while she was unconscious after being strangled, they focused solely on inflicting violence without any intent to sexually assault her. The police quickly identified a possible motive linked to Tracy and her husband. Not long before the home invasion, Tracy had experienced a traumatic incident. She was sexually assaulted by a dentist while under anesthesia. She regained consciousness during the assault, and the dentist attempted to silence her by promising to help her with her sexual problems and offering her $150,000 in compensation if she remained quiet. Tracy confided in her husband about this, and he urged her to report it to the police. Just 2 days after the dentist's attack on her, she was preparing to testify in court against her dentist, whom she was accusing of rape. He was likely the second person to invade her home, intending to silence her so she could not testify against him. However, police determined that the dentist had no connection to Dustin and had a solid alibi. He was at work at the time. Later, the Tracy recalled another individual who might have wanted her dead. His name was John Pittman, Tracy's first husband. They met while studying medicine at Northwestern University in Chicago. John was a fourth-year student interning at Chicago Clinical Hospital, and 19-year-old Tracy was in her first year of radiology. John was very controlling and aggressive, but Tracy was accustomed to such behavior after growing up with a domineering father, so she considered it normal. She married him, and they eventually moved to Denver, Colorado, where she gave birth to a son. As John tried to control every aspect of her life, she thought it was normal. However, over time, their marriage began to deteriorate. Tracy describes how he often abused her, especially during sex. Eventually, she grew tired of the physical violence, and they divorced. After the divorce, a custody battle began to take place. Bert revealed to his mother that his father had harassed him, leading to a contentious custody battle in court. Although there was no concrete evidence of harassment, Tracy was able to convince those present at the trial. Bert then lived with his mother. However, the long-running custody battle, which was still ongoing when the attack occurred, left John Pittman as a suspect. Even young Bert believed his father may have been involved in the attack. The police contacted John's colleagues in Virginia, where he lived, to confirm whether he had an alibi during the time of the crime. They found that he had a solid alibi. He was working at a clinic when the crime occurred. John denied any involvement, and there was no evidence against him. At that time, he was a successful plastic surgeon with an excellent reputation. His acquaintances found it hard to believe that John could harm his son or kill his ex-wife, whom he had not been involved with for a long time. However, John had not been cleared yet and remained a suspect. Months passed without any progress in the case, and Tracy grew increasingly anxious. She felt unsafe knowing that the second attacker was still at large, fearing that he might return to take revenge on her. Meanwhile, the police began investigating the new suspect, Tracy's second husband, Michael. Further investigation revealed that their marriage had long since deteriorated, and the emotional connection between them had faded. Some speculated that Michael may have wanted to get rid of Tracy, a theory that received considerable support from those around them. Bert, Tracy's eldest son, revealed a disturbing truth about his stepfather. The man was very strict and often punished Bert severely for even minor infractions. Meanwhile, Tracy did not address her husband's aggressive behavior or protect her children. It is possible that Tracy had become accustomed to this type of treatment from a young age and did not realize it was a problem. Michael's behavior was noted by the police during a hospital visit where he visited his surviving relatives. His reaction seemed to be genuine shock at finding them still alive, suggesting that this outcome was not what he had wanted. Michael had a strong alibi. He was in another city on business. This was confirmed by CCTV footage. He was later given a lie detector test, but failed it and appeared to be hiding something. The police suspected he may have been involved in planning the attack. He did not inform his wife about the failed lie detector test. Tracy eventually discovered the truth about the lie detector test. Tracy became increasingly paranoid, believing that both her husband and his friend were conspiring against her to gain sole custody of their child. She shared her suspicions with the police chief, citing a dream in which Michael mentioned the plot. Tracy believed that her husband was indeed involved in the case. The police began investigating Michael and discovered that his IT business was struggling and he was in large debt. However, the couple held multi-million-dollar life insurance policies, which may have motivated Michael to eliminate Tracy to solve his financial problems. Additionally, he had a close relationship with Dustin, which may have led him to convince the young man to help him. Despite these theories, there was no concrete evidence linking Michael to any wrongdoing. Tracy and Michael's relationship became increasingly strained. In 2004, 3 years after the attack, they divorced. At the time, police had not found enough evidence to arrest Michael. After the divorce, Tracy and her children moved away. She changed her home, her job, and even her name to escape and protect herself from potential threats. Meanwhile, her friend Mona also moved to another city with her daughters. The tragedy not only affected Dustin's life, but also led to the death of his father a year later. On Thanksgiving Day 2002, Dustin's father chose to end his life at Dustin's grave. The father was devastated by his son's death, especially because of the judgmental looks from others who viewed Dustin as a dangerous criminal. Meanwhile, Mona, devastated by a series of losses, could not stop questioning what really happened the day her son arrived at Tracy's house. Mona refused to believe that he intended to hurt the people he admired. Michael's family was important to Dustin. He struggled with social interactions and felt safe and grateful to be with Michael, who understood him. The Mona intended to file a wrongful death lawsuit against Tracy Roberts to hold her accountable for Dustin's death and to uncover what happened that night. Mona lawyers launched their own investigation and discovered inconsistencies in Tracy's repeated accounts of the event. In one version, she claimed to have recognized Dustin immediately, while in another, she said she only learned his identity later. Additionally, she described shooting from different positions in her various retellings. Due to these discrepancies and the confusion surrounding the details, the lawyers concluded that her story was fabricated. On the day of the murder, Mona was busy shopping for Christmas. She called home to check if Dustin was up yet, as he had an important meeting scheduled. Her daughter answered and said that Dustin had left. She was relieved that Dustin was awake and going about his business. Later, Mona's nephew called to inform her that something had happened at Tracy's house. Mona rushed over, suspecting that Tracy and Michael had hurt each other, but she could not fathom that her son had been murdered. Mona mentioned that the day before the murder, Tracy had invited her son to her house to ask for help with something. Mona believed that this was Tracy's way of luring Dustin into a trap. She believed that Tracy was hiding something. However, no one paid attention to Mona's testimony until 7 years after the Roberts burglary. The same investigative team revisited the case and began to suspect that Tracy might not be the hero protecting her son, but a potential killer. There was no sign of forced entry or attempted robbery in the house. How could two people have broken in without leaving any evidence? Dustin had 9 gunshot wounds, indicating he had been shot at close range with no chance of survival, and there was no evidence of a second attack. The police decided to speak with Tracy's first husband, John. He described her as a monster, revealing that she had had bouts of aggression, including one time when she pointed a gun at him while threatening violence. She eventually fired a shot into the ceiling, prompting him to call the police. John discovered that Tracy was both aggressive and unfaithful. She drained their bank accounts. He even hired a private detective because he suspected she was cheating, and the detective confirmed that several of Tracy's lovers left their home while John was at work. Eventually, John filed for divorce because he began to fear Tracy. Concerned about their son growing up in such a toxic environment with an unstable mother, he fought for custody. This enraged Tracy, who tried to turn their son against John. A dentist was accused of raping Tracy during a dental appointment, but he claimed that she had been harassing him for a long time and was willing to prove it. His practice was equipped with cameras and the recordings supported his claim. It was revealed that Tracy, upon learning of this, had withdrawn her complaint against the dentist the day before the incident. Tracy's second husband, Michael, who she accused of being abusive and harassing her, denied all her allegations to police. He said Tracy was unfaithful. Michael claimed that he put up with these problems for the sake of his children but eventually decided to divorce her. He described himself as a strict father who never abused his wife and children and claimed that Tracy turned the children against him after their divorce. After the divorce, Michael moved to California to focus on his business. The Tracy seemed to slander everyone around her, presenting herself as a victim of abuse from the men in her life. However, the reality was quite the opposite. Police believed that her account of the events from December 13, 2001, was just another lie fabricated by Tracy. The police wanted to meet with Bert to gather more information, but Tracy not only moved to another state and changed her personal information, she also frequently changed her contact information. The police had to thoroughly review the entire list of evidence again. One significant item was an old computer discovered in the back seat of Dustin's car. Tracy believed this computer was crucial evidence in the robbery because it belonged to her husband. However, it was puzzling why Dustin would steal it when there were more valuable and easier to take items available in the house. Additionally, a pink notebook was found in which Dustin had written plans for the murder shortly before his death. The notes indicated that his mission included killing Tracy Roberts, and surprisingly, the person who ordered the assassination was Tracy's first husband, John. However, there was a strange detail in these notes. They contained so many specific details about events that Dustin could not have known before the attack, yet they were written in his own handwriting. It seemed that Dustin had written them under duress, possibly under threat. Dustin's mother did not recognize the pink notebook, which seemed more suited for a woman. Dustin disliked this color and would never have purchased such a notebook. He never kept diaries, and the only content in this notebook was a crime plan, which appeared unusual. It looked brand new and seemed to have been used only once for those notes. It suggested that Tracy might have given the notebook to someone to stage a crime. The latest investigation revealed that Dustin was not the attacker but Tracy's victim. It was also revealed that Tracy had been facing problems in her new town in Nebraska, where she had recently moved. She was charged with falsifying documents and false identity. 10 years after the murder, the police discovered the truth. On July 27, 2011, the police arrested Tracy. The memories of a friend who had helped Tracy clean out her house provided vital information. The friend knew about a notebook containing Dustin's confession. The police discovered that all of these statements had been recorded at Tracy's request. Police found no signs of an attack in the house. The wounds to her neck were self-inflicted, as evidenced by minor scratches that were not life-threatening. The claim that Dustin had struggled to stand up after being shot multiple times was clearly implausible. Forensic experts analyzed crime scene photographs and determined, based on blood spatter, that Dustin was still lying on the floor, with all the shots coming from above. This contradicted Tracy's version of events. The defense argued that Tracy was simply trying to protect her child. They said much of the evidence against her was circumstantial. The defense relied heavily on the testimony of Tracy's eldest son, Bert. He claimed that he heard men screaming and saw someone dragging his mother out the door. Bert also confirmed that the attacker told his mother that she was dead and warned that he would be next. He then saw a young man with a gunshot wound trying to get up, as his mother had described. However, the reliability of Bert's testimony has been questioned. Tracy initially mentioned that the nursery door was closed at the time, preventing Bert from witnessing the incident. The prosecution argued that Bert's account may have been influenced by his mother. The prosecution argued that Tracy killed Dustin to frame her husband, hoping to gain sole custody of their children and access to his money. This was considered the primary motive for the crime. That same day, Tracy confronted Dustin at gunpoint, forced him to write in a notebook, and then shot him. She then staged a scene to make it look like she had been attacked, inflicting minor injuries on herself and leaving a notebook and a computer in Dustin's car. A forensic expert later confirmed that her injuries were inconsistent with her being unconscious, further casting doubt on her testimony. After reviewing the evidence, the jury found Tracy Roberts guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Tracy cried in court when she heard the verdict, but many people did not believe her tears, as they did not seem genuine. Again, she seemed to be acting. The situation was especially difficult for Bert, who was convinced that his mother had saved the lives of all her children that night and had been wrongly imprisoned. He continued to visit and support her. Years later, Tracy's second husband, Michael, with the approval of the guardianship agency, took the children back to Australia with his new wife. Tracy maintains her innocence and is currently serving her sentence at a women's correctional facility in Iowa. The case of Pam Hupp. Pam Hupp was born on October 20, 1958 in Delwood, Missouri, as the second child to the Newman family. She married Mark Hupp, and they had 2 children together. In 2001, the family relocated to Fallon, Missouri. Pam had a varied work history, eventually working as administrator for State Farm until 2010, when she stopped working due to back and leg pain. During this time, she started filing disability claims. On August 16, 2016, around noon, Louis Gumpenberger, a mentally challenged man who had been struggling with mental and physical disabilities since a car crash in 2005, died after being shot 5 times by Pam Hupp in her apartment. Earlier that day, Pam called 911, reporting a robbery. According to Pam, Gumpenberger had jumped out of a vehicle driven by another person, attacked her with a knife while she was in her SUV, and she claimed she slapped the knife away with a karate chop. Pam said she then ran into her house, grabbed her Ruger LCR from the nightstand, and shot Gumpenberger 5 times in self-defense. She alleged that Gumpenberger ordered her to drive him to the bank to withdraw Russ's money, and claimed that Gumpenberger attacked her in her driveway. Russ was Russ Faria, a man wrongly convicted of murdering his wife Betsy in 2011. At the crime scene, the police found 9 $100 bills on Betsy's body, along with a handwritten note addressed to her. The note contained chilling instructions for the killer, detailing what they needed to do at Pam's apartment. Firstly, they had to retrieve Russ's money. Then they would take Pam into the house, kill her, and make it look like Russ's wife was responsible. The murderer wanted Pam's life to end in a specific way. They even specified that the knife should be left sticking out of her neck. They were willing to pay Gumpenberger a hefty sum of $10,000 for completing the task. Pam Hupp was arrested for murder. However, truth behind Gumpenberger's death emerged when Pam voluntarily visited O'Fallon police. During her interview, Pam asked if it be recorded, citing her TV appearances with KTVI's Chris Hayes, whom she blamed for attracting criminals. According to the Fallon chief of police and the prosecuting attorney of St. Charles County, Pam had lured Gumpenberger into her home by posing as a television producer named Kathy. She pretended this was for a TV show and tricked him into reenacting a 911 emergency call, providing a perfect cover for the horrific crime she was about to commit. After murdering Gumpenberger, Pam wrote a note that was later found on his body. The police were convinced that Pam was a ruthless killer due to the overwhelming evidence they discovered, including the $100 bills found on the deceased's body. It was later revealed that Pam had planted these bills on Gumpenberger's body. Significantly, the 10th $100 bill was found in Pam's dresser, and its serial number was sequential with 3 of the other $100 bills found on the body. The St. Charles County Police subsequently reopened a complaint filed on August 10, 2016, by Carol Alford, who reported a woman matching Pam's description. This woman had approached Alford, offering to pay her $1,000 to participate in a fake 911 call, and was driving an SUV identical to Pam's. It emerged that Carol Alford was not the only one with a similar complaint. Brent Harleton informed the police that Pam had made him the same offer less than an hour before she shot Gumpenberger. Pam claimed in her interview that she had never met Gumpenberger before, but phone records showed that she had been at his doorstep. Further investigation revealed that Pam owned the knife she claimed Gumpenberger used to attack her, which she had purchased along with other items at a store in O'Fallon. It was also discovered that Pam had a habit of storing her knife between her kitchen counter and stove, similar to how the knife was found in her car, wedged between the passenger seat and central console. During a search of her home, police found a carpet swatch that seemed to be placed to protect her rug from Gumpenberger's blood. The police had doubts about Gumpenberger's ability to commit the crime due to his mental state. It became clear that Pam was guilty when she shot Gumpenberger, apparently trying to protect her rug from blood. On August 23, 2016, Pam Hupp was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. When she was arrested, she asked to use the restroom and then attempted to take her own life by stabbing her wrist and neck with a ballpoint pen. Fortunately, she failed. Pam made her first court appearance on January 30, 2017, where St. Charles County Assistant Prosecutor Phil Groenweg argued that her actions demonstrated a consciousness of guilt. Pam Hupp was convicted on all charges by a grand jury in December 2016 and was given a $2 million bail. Her trial began in 2017, during which she pleaded not guilty, prompting the prosecutor to seek the death penalty. They argued that she had made a decision to target Gumpenberger as her victim. In June 2019, Pam entered an Alford plea, effectively withdrawing her request for a jury trial and avoiding the death penalty. Following her guilty plea, she was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole in August 2019. After her sentencing, Pam called her then-husband, Matt Hupp, and admitted to killing Louis Gumpenberger to spare their family the ordeal of a distressing trial. The trial exposed a disturbing aspect of Pam's character, revealing a shocking truth that horrified the police, judges, and the entire nation. In June 2016, Judge Cunningham ruled that evidence related to the brutal murder of Betsy Faria could be presented in court, leading to the reopening of the Betsy Faria case. Betsy Faria, born Elizabeth K. Meyer Faria, resided in Troy, Missouri, where she worked alongside Pam at State Farm as a life insurance administrator. In 2010, Betsy was diagnosed with cancer, and by October 2011, she had discovered that it had spread to her liver, leaving her with only a few months to live. Prior to her death, on December 22, 2011, Betsy altered the sole beneficiary of her $150,000 life insurance policy, replacing her husband, Russ Faria, with Pam Hupp, without informing him or their daughters of the change. Pam later claimed that Betsy had instructed her to establish a trust fund for her daughters until they came of age. However, Pam subsequently alleged that Betsy had wanted her to keep the money for herself, citing a previously undisclosed romantic relationship between the two women before Betsy's death. Betsy's daughters became suspicious and took Pam to court in 2014, but their attempt to retrieve their mother's life insurance fund from Pam and her husband Matt was dismissed by the court. In 2016, Russ took legal action against State Farm. 5 days after Betsy made Pam Hupp the sole beneficiary of her life insurance policy on December 22, 2011, Betsy attended a chemotherapy session at the Alvin J. Siteman Cancer Center, which left her weakened. Afterwards, she went to her mother's house as planned, where Russ was supposed to pick her up, or she would stay overnight. However, Pam Hupp unexpectedly arrived at Betsy's mother's house and offered to drive Betsy home, claiming she dropped her off around 7 p.m. Betsy's daughter later stated that her mother missed her call at approximately 7:21 p.m. By 9:40 p.m., Russ made an emergency call to 911, frantically reporting that his wife Betsy had taken her own life. Russ spent the evening at his friend Michael Corbin's house, watching movies from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Afterwards, he drove to Arby's Lake in St. Louis before heading back home. When Russ called for help, the first responders arrived about 10 minutes later. Upon examining the scene, they immediately ruled out the possibility of suicide. Betsy's body was found lying on her right side, with 55 stab wounds and a wrist cut to the bone. A kitchen knife was lodged in her neck, and another knife was discovered under her pillow. Notably, there were no bloodstains or footprints near the entrance of the house. The estimated time of Betsy's death was determined to be between 7:20 p.m. and 9:41 p.m. Fingers pointed to Russ Faria as the main suspect after his wife's murder. Authorities believed he had a motive due to being denied $150,000. Russ was arrested a day after the murder and charged with first-degree murder, despite claiming innocence. A pair of blood-stained slippers were found in his closet, and he failed a polygraph test. The police deemed his demeanor suspicious and erratic. Russ's bail was set at $250,000, which he couldn't pay, so he was jailed until his November 18th trial. Pam told police Russ was violent, a heavy drinker, and had threatened Betsy before. With a $150,000 motive, it was easy to suspect him. Russ's trial was an extremely challenging and brutal process. According to his lawyer Joel Schwartz, Russ maintained his innocence, stating that he was with friends on the night in question, and they corroborated his alibi. Furthermore, Russ had purchased food from a store, making it practically impossible for him to have committed the crime in question. The prosecutor countered that Russ's friends were in on it, lying about his whereabouts and maybe even helping him. The judge, Christina Menem, refused to let Schwartz present evidence pointing to an alternative suspect, Pam, despite strong evidence of her motive and suspicious behavior. She claimed to have put $100,000 from insurance into a trust fund for her sister's daughters, but later admitted to keeping it for herself. She didn't want others to have it, so she implied she wanted someone else to have it. A detective reported a crime scene camera malfunction, causing key photos to be lost. Despite the odds, Russ was convicted of murder and armed criminal action, sentenced to life plus 30 years. Before Russ's retrial, her lawyer obtained the photos showing no blood trail. He's still trying to find out who sent them to him. Betsy Pam's case took a welcome turn during re-examination. At trial, her sister Camp testified that Russ was devastated when his wife removed him from her insurance policy. Russ had pressed a pillow to Camp's face. Russ's friends were accused of being accessories to murder, but no charges were filed. After 4 years in prison, Russ's attorney appealed the conviction in 2015. However, a judge rejected a review of the case in 2013. In 2014, KTVI and the St. Louis Post-Dispatch reinvestigated the case, unveiling suspicious facts about Betsy's death and the killer's identity. Pam Hupp's alibi was discredited due to contradictory statements, and it was revealed she lied about not being in the Furia home. The fact that Pam was completely forgotten about in the murder case was not only shocking to Schwartz and Russ, but some members of the Lincoln County Sheriff's Department had also been confused as to why Pam was not being investigated as a possible suspect in the case. In an interview, an officer had shared how shocked he was when no one was looking in Pam's direction. Everyone had been fixated on Russ. Media exposed prosecuting attorney ASI's effort to imprison Russ, revealing her relationships with the captain of investigations Mike Lang and a lead investigator prosecuting witness. This led to a retrial in 2015 with a new judge, Christina Menem, initially presiding. After Menem's recusal, Judge Stephen R. granted a new bench trial and released Russ on bond. Schwartz presented evidence against Pam, revealing she told police she saw Russ with another man. CSI agent Amy Buhner believed Russ's blood-stained slippers were planted evidence. Russ was acquitted in 2015 and later sued ASI and deputies for ignoring exonerating evidence and fabricating their own. Russ was surprised by the speedy exoneration. Russ won a $2 million settlement in 2020. ASI faced a bar complaint from Joel Schwartz, but it was rejected in 2016. In 2017, ASI cooperated with the U.S. Attorney's review of Betsy Faria's case and asked for an independent probe into her conduct, but was cleared of any wrongdoing. Judge Christina Menem was suspended in 2017 for misconduct. She and ASI were later voted out for mishandling the Betsy Faria murder case. In 2019, Lincoln County appointed Mike Wood as the new attorney, who reopened the case, inspired by Russ Ferris's wrong conviction. After Pam Hupp's Alford plea, Wood requested a review by the major case squad. The case also motivated Rick Harold to run for Lincoln County Sheriff in 2020. Pam Hupp was questioned as a suspect in Betsy Faria's murder in July 2021. She was charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. The prosecutor sought the death penalty due to the brutal nature of the crime, which included 55 stab wounds and a severely cut wrist. Evidence against Pam included a $150,000 life insurance policy, which she claimed for herself despite promising to put it in a trust fund for Betsy's daughter. Pam Hupp claimed she and Betsy were lovers in 2021 and that Betsy wanted more than friendship. She betrayed Betsy, saying Betsy had a crush on her. Prosecutor Mike Wood thought Pam murdered Betsy, stabbing her 55 times with a kitchen knife while she slept. Pam then used her socks to spread footprints, trying to appear as domestic violence. Pam Hupp's case file linked her to Betsy Faria's murder. Despite claiming to be home by 7:20 p.m., Pam's call records showed she was still at Betsy's. Betsy's body position suggested she was killed by someone she trusted. Pam pleaded not guilty in 2022, but her trial was delayed due to her attorney's death. It's now set to begin in 2025 and last about a month. Prosecutor Mike Wood thought the case against Pam Hupp was mishandled from the start, with bias against Russ Faria in his second trial. A 2015 destruction order could have erased key evidence, luckily overlooked, ensuring Faria's release.